Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Madame le greffier.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst. Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham. Madame le Sénateur Ferguson. Monsieur le Sénateur Lafondre. Madame le Sénateur Valois.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Moore.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Pallet.
Present.
Monsieur le Sénateur Mezek.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur. Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Brelade.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre. Monsieur le Connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Clément.
Present.
Madame le Député Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Southern.
Present.
Madame le Député de Grouville.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Lewis.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Tadier.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Higgins. Monsieur le Député Masson.
Present. Present.
Madame le Député Pinel.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Martin.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Ouen.
Present.
Madame le Député Doublé.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Labbé.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Wickenden.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Sainte-Marie.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Truscott.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Young.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Ash.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Morel.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Guida.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Pierre.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de la Trinité.
Present.
Monsieur le Député de Saint-Jean.
Present.
Madame le Député Lehegara.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Ayer.
Present.
Madame le Député Pershaw. Monsieur le Député Ward.
Present.
Madame le Député Alves.
Present.
Monsieur le Député Pamplin.
Present.
Madame le Député Gardner.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et les puissances de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et que nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, donner-leur que les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de les conduire tellement en même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il te plut de commettre à leur soin. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par les mérites de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, que nous enseigne à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car toi est la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le Sénateur Gorst.
Excusez. Yes.
Senator Gorst is just finishing off an industry conference, which I've just left. I'm sure he'll be with us very shortly.
Well, he's excusé until he's present, so excusé.
Monsieur le Sénateur Farnham.
Present.
Madame le Sénateur Ferguson,
Présent.
Monsieur le Sénateur Lefondre,
Présent.
Madame le Connétable de Saint-Sauveur,
Excusez,
Monsieur le Connétable de Saint-Pierre,
excusez,
Madame le Député Pershaw.
Malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le Député Pershaw est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux états sans exposer sa santé. Madame le Député Gardner,
Sir, Deputy Gardner's at a medical appointment at present. She'll be with us shortly.
well, we'll mark her excusez, and then when she arrives and indicates in the chat, we will make, we will mark her as present. Les états sont constitués. Before resuming the debate, there are one or two matters to deal with. The first I would deal with is to ask the chair of PPC whether there is anything that she wishes to put before the Assembly at the moment with regard to continuation and the conduct of future business over this sitting.
Yes, please, sir. Can I? Apologies, my voice again it still isn't great. I've just pasted into chat the results from this survey that I sent round overnight, and as you can see, the majority of members would prefer to sit late today and tomorrow. So I'd like to propose that we sit until 8 o'clock this evening.
Yes. Well,
Thanks.
well, so there's a proposal that for this evening the Assembly sits until 8 p.m. Is that seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on that, or may I take it on a standing vote? Deputy Ward?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so I would like to say that today, I mean, all of the amendments that I'm involved in myself and with my panel are today, and it's going to be continuous. I don't have the backing of officers to write me speeches. It will be a constant continuation, and that will mean that we will be here until very, very late this evening. We put days aside, and I don't see why we're staying till 8 o'clock on 2 days, simply so it's convenient to not be in next week. I don't think good decisions are made when we go late into the day. I think people are slapdash or don't listen or don't engage in debates purely out of fatigue, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. If we were to say, let's sit until 6:30, an extra hour on the day, then that's palatable. But until 8 o'clock tonight means that we would go from 12 until 8. And I know people do shifts and so on, and that's fine. But I just don't see why we're changing standing orders so quickly. I mean, I feel today, sir, I've got to say, and I'll be absolutely honest about this, I've attended the Assembly every single day. I haven't today because of the work I've got in front of me in terms of focus and so on, because there are no facilities in the Assembly for backbenchers, printers aren't working, etc., etc. So I've taken the choice that I didn't want to have to take of staying at home so I can put my materials out and be properly prepared, because I've taken a huge amount of time to prepare for every single debate today. And if we're going to go on to 8 o'clock, I'm glad I did, because it's the only way we can get through that day without sitting there for such a long time with nothing to support us. I think if we're going to do this, then we should be saying then we're all in the Assembly and we'll stay until 8 o'clock in the Assembly, because those who have decided to go into the Assembly today, they are there, including yourself, including the officers as well. And we are asking officers to stay until 8 o'clock tonight. I think this is unnecessary, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think people need to think very, very carefully before they extend the day like this. I'm quite happy to do long days. I do long days. But are we going to make the right sort of decisions, have the right sort of debate, or is this going to be a token gesture towards debate because people are just indifferent to people bringing propositions and feel that these backbenchers shouldn't be bringing these propositions, or government thinks, oh, we're going here again. Do we have a democracy or do we not have a democracy? Do we have a set times to actually speak in the Assembly and attend, or do we not? I personally feel forced out of sitting in the Assembly today to look after my own well-being, so I can make sensible approaches and sensible summaries of the propositions going on with the facilities that I've got in front of me at home, because there's nothing in the Assembly for me to work with. So I ask members to not do this, and I would propose that we sit until, in fact, so I won't, because we're just wasting time, but I just want to voice my objection, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir, and good morning all. I want to come at it at a slightly different angle. I want to ensure that the members of the staff of the Greffier were consulted at some stage, but equally thinking about that I can propose that if we do go ahead, that we pause for a half an hour comfort break at 5:30 till 6 to allow members of staff to get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and all of us to just refresh, to then continue to 8. I think that's a sensible way forward if hopefully members agree. So I'd like to make that proposition and ensure, again, as I say, that all members of staff supporting us are equally considered at this time. Thank you, sir.
Well, at this moment, Deputy, we're only considering the extension of time until 8:30. If you wish to bring a further proposition, or I was intending in any event that we took a 15-minute break at some stage, close to the end of the normal afternoon, for those sorts of reasons. But if you want to make a formal proposition afterwards, it's open to you to do so, but not just at this moment. Deputy of St Martin.
Thank you, sir, and I won't speak for long. I just want to back up everything that Deputy Ward has said. I think it's vital that we consider our staff. The other thing I just want to point out, sir, is that when we had the request last night, are we happy to sit late? There was no indication of what late meant, and I presumed in my voting that we were talking about 6:30 or maybe 7 at the outset. But 8 o'clock, as Deputy Ward says, is very late.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to thank Deputy Owls for actually making the arrangements ahead of time, because those of us with caring responsibilities need that extra notice in order to make arrangements, which I have been able to make, and I did vote on the poll in favour of staying late. I just want to remind members that next week the school, excuse me, sir, the schools will have broken up. And childcare is going to be an issue. So for those with caring responsibilities, I think this is a sensible move. It's been provided with notice for us to make arrangements. And I note what Deputy Ward is saying, but I don't think we're going to be any less tired next week. And I think, in fact, we run the risk of not being quorate, because those days weren't set aside as continuation days. So I would urge members to support the staying late this evening, and I do think a half-hour comfort break rather than 15 minutes would be appropriate, just to enable us to refresh ourselves.
Well, I certainly wouldn't have any difficulty with that if that was the general mood of the Assembly. Conor St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I just want to express my support for Deputy Ward. I mean, if you look at the order paper, most of the propositions coming up are his, and having presented propositions myself, it's, if we have to work through as late o'clock, for us it's less of a strain, but for him it's going to be an incredible amount of work, and I have a great deal of sympathy with what he says. I know myself it's a difficult job presenting matters to the States, and his workload will be quite substantial today if we vote to stay late. So I think his view of staying till 6:30 seems to me to be more reasonable.
Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. I simply wanted to ask for clarity on the timing of this, because I've heard 8 o'clock mentioned, but also 8:30 by a different speaker. So, and I think, as the Constable of St. Juan has just indicated, perhaps there is some room for manoeuvre here. So, well, could we propose perhaps a different time? I could propose.
No, I think we have to deal with one time and then propose a different time if that time isn't accepted by the Assembly. I had heard 8:30, but I may have misheard. What was your proposition, Deputy Alves? 8.
It was 8 o'clock, sir.
It was 8. I apologise. I misheard that. In which case, the proposal before the Assembly is 8 o'clock. Any other member wish to? Deputy Tadier. Deputy Tadier, you indicated a desire to speak and then you withdrew. As a matter, I'll call on you now, but as a matter of principle, if members indicate a desire to speak, in principle, they can't withdraw and then speak later on. And the reason for that is that, of course, you then get members positioning for who they want to speak after. And frankly, that makes the whole process unwieldy. So generally, an indication of a desire to speak will be called at the time the desire is made. And if it's withdrawn, then it won't be recalled subsequently. But I haven't made that ruling before now. So, Deputy, please speak.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. I completely agree with you. The reason was a technical one, not a tactical one, and I think it's correct that that's the case. So it's just to say, I mean, obviously neither scenario is ideal, and one consideration I wanted to bring up is that it's entirely likely that various members, whatever their role in the Assembly, will have other commitments this evening, not so much normal commitments, but ones that occur at this time of year where they're supporting various groups either in the parish or in the community, which are directly or indirectly linked to our roles. And whilst I know that the oath of office requires us to attend the states when we're asked to do so, it does seem a bit unfair to have to do that at very short notice, when I think that I know the same argument can be applied to next week, of course, but one would expect to be working during normal hours, let's say from 9 till 5, whether that's on constituency work or at the parish hall or wherever it is that one tends to be based. And another observation, just following on from Deputy Ward, who I've got a lot of sympathy for, if he's going to be in that position to have to, you know, I know how draining it can be mentally, even to have to present 1 or 2 propositions and then sit there listening to every comment, making notes, and you can't switch off. And to have to do that for several propositions in a row, I think is going to be very difficult. And there is a disparity here, of course, because if it simply means that some members will have the laptop on in the background and in their kitchen, as I may well be doing, preparing my dinner, but listening attentively, it's completely different to somebody who might have to sit in a particular seat, listening to every word and making notes, etc. And I would have thought, for good order, that we simply agree to come back next week when most of the island would also be working in daytime, when that's what we normally do in the daytime, and we make the decisions in a good headspace, sir. Thank you
very much. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I wasn't able to vote in the chair of the PPC's straw poll. Had I got mine to work, I would have voted definitely for continuation days. I think going into the evening is a very bad principle. In my experience, I've seen debates rushed. Members' attention will vary. We've all got attention spans and so on that are very finite, I think, that differs each of us. It is a very bad principle. I think we've chosen to have assemblies every 3 weeks and not every 2 weeks. We're getting a massive amount of compression business. If we do this when the island plan comes up and we start getting, where there's 64 amendments, and we start getting requests to go on to 8 o'clock, 8:30, 9, 10 at night, I fear for that very, very much, sir. So I'm going to vote as a principle against that, against any late night extension, and we should allow in all of our arrangements for the possibility of continuation days when we get large volumes of business compressed into a limited timetable. I think that's obvious from the start. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Constable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I agree entirely with the last speaker. This appears to be the result of a 3-week cycle. Due to this, we get too much to deal with at each sitting. We all have appointments during the intermediate weeks, so the suggestion of running into next week is not possible. 6:30 tonight, though, would be acceptable, I would think, to most people. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Constable. Constable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. I have every sympathy with Deputy Ward, but running into next week would cause massive difficulties. I mean, I've got 2 full days of meetings, Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday morning, even though it's a run up to Christmas. We've got PPC. I've got all sorts of jam-packed meetings, so I'd then have to rearrange all of those. So a lot of us do have a lot of business to do next week. It is the government plan week, so I was expecting that we would be staying late this week, so I was ready for this. I do think, again, I think it's probably the result of a 3-week cycle, but I'm well prepared to stay tonight. I am in the Assembly today. I do have sympathy for Deputy Ward, but it is the government plan week, so I do think we should stay, and maybe we could stay, if he's suggesting 6:30 and the proposition's 8, could we stay, if we have a half an hour comfort break as being mooted, could we stay till 7 o'clock? Would that suit everybody? Thank you.
Well, we have to deal with one proposition at a time, Conattab, so it's a question of who gets in next if this one is not successful. Deputy Hegarah.
Thank you, sir. I fully accept what everyone said, but as Deputy Doublé explained, the school's finished this week, and some of us have already made pre-plans to actually be out of Ireland as of this weekend. Some people may say that maybe we shouldn't have made those bookings. However, due to COVID and other circumstances, some of us have had travel plans changed and changed again. And from that point of view, sir, I am in a difficult position because I will have to send my apologies for next week because I will not be here and I cannot change that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Yes, sorry for prolonging this. I absolutely support the chair of PPC in what she said. I make the point, sir, that actually this isn't a result of a 3-week cycle. Anybody who has got any recollection of any similar debates, as I'm entirely in agreement with the Conattab of St Martin's, this has always been the government plan week. I would make the point that there were 26 amendments lodged. That's not a factor of the 3-week cycle. That's a factor that enough people have taken interest in the government plan to lodge a lot of amendments. I think I'm just relieved that obviously Council Ministers has accepted half of them. But the point I would make for looking ahead is that it is actually easier to do a 6:30 on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday for the sake of argument, because it then spreads the load rather than having to do a later evening as a one splurge, as it were, tonight. But that's where we are. I definitely think it should be contained within this week if we can. So I absolutely do support the 8 o'clock. It was raised yesterday, sir. And in fact, I think the decision was to allow Deputy Elves to email members yesterday. So we did have early warning. And frankly, on big set piece debates, government plan is nothing new in terms of this, MTFP previously, the budget, whatever it is always, we try not to add anything onto the rest of the week because we know it's a big week and members should build that in. And I think Deputy Doublé said exactly the same point. After the weekend, in fact, to be honest, after this Friday, it is not unreasonable on the schedule that States members have as the last sitting that they then build in the time, which is about family time and connection with relatives. So I absolutely support the 8 o'clock tonight. I'll restrict myself to that. I've seen one or two other observations, but that's the reality of what we do. I do have sympathy with Deputy Warden in his comments, but you know, that's where we are, and that's our job, and that's what the public expect of us. Obviously, other parliaments, other assemblies work through till midnight, so at times.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chief Minister. Deputy Wickenden.
Sir, I don't need to add any more. The Chief Minister very much better articulated exactly what I was going to say, sir.
Very much. Senator Farnham.
Similar lines. So whilst I have a great deal of respect for Deputy Ward, he's a hard-working deputy, I don't have sympathy on this occasion because he brought these amendments. There's a lot of work involved, and we've all worked very hard to deliver what we're trying to deliver today. I just wanted to urge members that we must, despite the important debates we have ahead of us, we must be perhaps a little more adroit at the debates and avoid repetition and try and be as productive as possible as we seek to finish the business this week. Thank you.
Very much. Senator, does any member wish to speak on the matter of the state sitting until 8 p.m. this evening? Very well. If no member wishes to speak, I close the debate. And do you wish to respond, Deputy Alves?
Yes, so I've made some notes, so I'll try and respond as well as I can. I did get 35 individual responses overnight, so I'd just like to thank members for that. And a screenshot was kindly sent round by Deputy Masson for those that couldn't access the form, and I had 5 extra people who did. So I just want to thank everybody for their points, and just sort of reiterate some of the things that have already been said, that next week was not down as continuation days. I am happy to have a break, and I did presume that that's what would happen at the end, sort of at 5:30 today. I think it is really important that I also state that I did hear from a few people who will be away next week, because as Deputy Dublé and Deputy Lehegara stated, the schools do finish, and obviously next week was not down as continuation days. I've suggested until 8 o'clock this evening, because actually I did have a suggestion via email until 9 o'clock, and I thought that was too much. I think if we could get everything, or as much as possible, done by 6:30, that would be great. But I think we would run the risk of having to sit next week, which would make things a lot more difficult. I mean, I'm happy to change the time if this is defeated, obviously, to make things more accessible to members. And I also did just want to reiterate the point that the Constable of St Martin and also the Chief Minister said, this is nothing to do with the 3-week cycle, sir. This is not the first time this has happened, and it's quite common with a government plan sitting. So I expected this to happen, and I assume a lot of other members expected this to happen as well, sir. So so I'd like to maintain the proposition, and I'm happy to incorporate a half-an-hour break at 5:30. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. So the proposition is the Assembly continues until 8 p.m. this evening, although not part of the proposition formally. We would have a half-hour break at 5:30 or thereabouts. I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Well, how would you like to vote, Deputy? Don't just. Yes, I'll let you vote orally if that's. Oh, right. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Proposition is adopted, 31 votes pour, 9 votes contre, no abstentions within the link, and a further 3 votes pour within the chat. Very well, the Assembly will sit until 8 p.m. this evening, and there will be a half-hour gap around about 5:30 at a convenient moment, so people can have a short break. Deputy Alves, obviously, we don't know how the business of the Assembly will proceed today in terms of how rapidly it will proceed, but it may be that you will want to consider the matter towards the ordinary end of the business day today as to whether there's a likelihood of a late sitting tomorrow, so people can be given as much warning. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Point of order, Connétable of St Brelade, I think.
Yes, sir, thank you. In the light of developments late yesterday, which may lead to far more pressure on staff, notwithstanding the pressures here, sir, in the chamber, I feel that despite the urgencies I outlined yesterday, the reality is that it would be unwise to press for the delivery of a lessons learned report by the end of April. I therefore accept the Council of Ministers amendment and apologise to members who may have prepared for debate today. Thank you, sir.
That you accept the amendment is, of course, it's a helpful indication, but the debate is open and there still has to be a vote on the amendment and people are still entitled to speak. But I think that indication may well persuade those who otherwise would have wished to speak not to, but that's a matter for them. Very well, the debate resumes and I have next listed to speak Deputy Lewis. This is on the Council of Ministers amendment to make the date for the report deliverable by the 29th of July next year instead of the 30th of April.
Thank you, sir. I do have a speech prepared, sir, but in view of the constable's statement, it might be prudent to withdraw my speech because I think it falls away. I stand
Thank you very much. Sebastian, Deputy Ward.
Thanks, sir.
So I'll just go along with the farce that has become our democracy. I'm withdrawing my speech. Let's just leave it.
Very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment to the Second Amendment? No other member wishes to speak. The matter must be formally put to a vote. If no member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and presumably in light of the indication given, Chief Minister, did you want to respond?
I think all I will say, sir, in anticipation, is that I very much welcome the intervention of the Conotab. I think I'll just reiterate the point from the chair of PPC yesterday. It's absolutely critical that the chairperson chairing this is absolutely independent and free of bias, and that unfortunately takes the time that PPC themselves have indicated. And so therefore I very much welcome the intervention of the Conotab. I don't think I'll say any more at this stage, and I maintain the amendment, sir.
Very much. Deputy Graville, I notice you indicated a desire to speak. Obviously, I'm afraid your request to speak came in after I closed the debate, and therefore there is no opportunity to speak at this time.
Yes,
well,
there seems to be a delay in putting messages up and you getting them.
Well, I will. I'll take that in mind. I thought I'd afforded a sufficient period, but if I don't, I shall make it a little bit longer in the future. Very well. If ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The Council of Ministers amendment has been adopted. 39 votes pour, 3 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour noted in the chat. Very well.
3, please.
The 3. Sorry, yes,
Those voting contre, Deputy Southern, Deputy Ward. And Senator Mezek.
Very well. We now return to debate on the Second Amendment, now as amended. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? no member wishes to speak on the amendment.
The appel, please, sir.
Yes, I was going to put a vote on, but I'm waiting just to see if there's a latecomer to the speaking desires. No, therefore I close. Therefore I close the debate. There is no right to respond because no speeches have been made, and therefore I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link. Open the voting and ask members to vote.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Put another one up. Sorry.
this is just a test for members. Well spotted to everyone, and I now ask the greffier to place an open vote into the link. No, you have to ignore the link that's in there at the moment and wait for a new one to come in, Deputy.
Apology.
Very well. The link, voting link has been posted. I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted, 35 votes pour, 5 votes contre, 1 abstention in the link, and a further 3 votes pour in the chat.
Could we have the 5 and the 1, sir, please?
Those voting contre, the Connétable of St Helier, the Connétable of Trinity, Deputy Ward, Senator Valois, and Deputy Southern, and Deputy Doublé abstained.
Very well. We now move on to the 6th amendment lodged by Deputy Ward, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 3, paragraph F. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 of the report, insert the words, with funding to be allocated from the COVID-19 response head of expenditure in Summary Table 5.1 and made available for use by the Minister for Infrastructure to provide for the establishment from 1st of January 2022 or as soon as possible thereafter in the first quarter of 2022 of a bus pass scheme for which a charge of £20 per annum should be levied on the individual for all people eligible to pay fares aged 18 years or under, with the overall cost of, take-up of and customer satisfaction with the scheme to be subsequently reviewed by the Minister and the outcome of the review to be published by the end of the third quarter of 2022.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. And I will go with the will of the Assembly. I'll be as brief as I possibly can be in my opening speech. So, of course, we've been here before, and there is a choice in politics. You either fight for what you believe in, or you meander along and take the easy option. I am one of those who fights for what they believe in. I bring this amendment for some very simple and basic reasons. We should not be charging our children to travel to school on the bus. This is a regressive tax on education access, a tax on parents that disproportionately affects those on the lowest incomes. Parents need all the help they can get. Removing this cost will put money into their pockets. If we are to change behaviour around how we transport ourselves, we must act. This is a tangible action that addresses the behaviour of the next generation of those who would travel on Ireland. It's not the answer to transport problems, but an ingredient in the long-term solutions. I know that we will see some opposition, the same opposition as normal, and the comments paper reflects the tired, confused and inconsistent arguments against this change. I will wait for speeches and then address this in closing. I will also address the paucity of data regarding costs, usage, etc. from government. This amendment is a one-year trial where real data can be obtained, specific to Jersey for future planning, rather than a high-level generic plan from jurisdictions that do not match us as an island. I remind members that the proposition states, with the overall cost of take-up of and custom satisfaction with the scheme, with the overall cost of, take-up of, and customer satisfaction with the scheme to be subsequently reviewed by the Minister and the outcome of the review to be published by the end of the third quarter of 2022. So we do not tie the hands of future assemblies, but we do gather data, but we make a change now. I will also give examples of how this directly affects parents and families at the end. I'm interested to see members' understanding and views on this area of the amendment. What understanding is there on the impact of these costs on real families? So that's it, sir. Short and sweet, a simple introduction that opens for a debate. I hope we can be sensible, kind and thoughtful. Sir, I propose the amendment. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy. Is it seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? If no member wishes to speak on the amendment, Senator Mezek, yes.
Thank you, sir. Just to prevent the risk, I suppose, of this not being debated at all, but I want to state my wholehearted support for what Deputy Ward is trying to do with this amendment. This shows, I think, a continuation of the innovative thinking that Deputy Ward has displayed in his time in this Assembly when it comes to sustainable transport and changing the way that our transport system works in the island, not just so that it's more equitable and affordable, but also, you would hope at the end of it, also more environmentally friendly by encouraging more sustainable transport for people whilst they're younger and get that ingrained into them and used to it as they grow older. And I think that Deputy Ward's point on principle that children are charged to go to school is actually a very powerful point. And I remember when I was growing up, I never lived more than a 5-minute walk from any of the schools that I went to, which always made my teachers wonder why I was still 10 minutes late every day. But getting the bus to school was never an issue for me. But I had friends who came from different parts of the island whose parents would have to spend a small fortune to get them on the bus to go to school. In many instances, the parents couldn't drive them there because the school was just located in an awkward position for them. Or if they had driven them to school, they would simply be adding to traffic congestion in the morning and afternoon and adding to pollution. And we know the issue of air quality monitoring around schools is one which is likely to come back as well. And the situation will have got worse in the time since I was at school because the cost of bus fares has gone up, up and up. And if you're from a family with a relatively low income and you have, say, 3 children who are all going to school, in fact, depending on what years they're in, they may be going to different schools for parts of their childhood, and that can cause a great inconvenience to those families and a great cost to them as well. And if they're going to, and if they're not going to put up with the cost of sending their children to school on the bus, the alternative is to drive them, and that's not something we want to be encouraging either. So I think in taking a lead on this and saying there is a better way of doing things, and it's to look at our school bus network and find ways to either incentivize people to use it rather than driving, or at least to make it cheaper for those who do use it, because it's a great cost to them week on week, has got to be a good thing. And it's a good thing which comes in the absence up until now of any suggestion that I've seen in this term of office from government to improve our public transport network. In fact, every single proposal, tangible proposal for change in our public transport network has come from Deputy Ward, who's shown great leadership on this. And I think at this later stage of this term of office, I don't think it's satisfactory to say we'll get to the end of our 4-year term and be able to say that in actual fact we've achieved nothing on sustainable transport. There may be a nice report coming, there may be some nice words on a sheet of paper, but in terms of improving the public transport network, not a lot can be said at this point. I think, in fact, actually the one exception to what I've just said was the recent announcement for bus pass for carers. That was announced recently, which I totally supported, thought was a thoroughly good thing. But every argument that could be made against what Deputy Ward is proposing today could well have been argued against that as well. In fact, it could have been argued against the bus pass for people with disabilities. It could be argued against the bus pass for pensioners, because at the point of introduction, you don't know what the financial implications will be. You don't know how many journeys that are currently being paid for won't be paid for. You don't know how many people will ultimately sign up to it and take advantage of it who otherwise wouldn't have been. You don't know how much on parking in town you might lose out on, although that's obviously not particularly relevant for this iteration. So I think to say that for a particular journey that happens twice a day, that is absolutely essential for hundreds of young people in the island 5 days a week, come what may, to find an easier way of managing that for them by having a £20 bus pass that then covers their transport for the duration of the year, rather than having to constantly buy bus tickets or pay for your journey when you get on the bus, which really does add up at the end of the week for many families. This provides, I think, a good solution to that, a good way forward. And as Deputy Ward said, if it turns out that there are issues with it, or there are financial consequences to it which need to be considered, well, what he's proposing is to be reviewed by the end of next year, so that we can come back and determine whether it needs tweaking, whether it needs extending, or whether it needs rolling back, depending on the actual success that they experience with it, rather than what we might theoretically think might be the case now. So I'm very pleased to be supporting this to make life easier for that part of our society, and for what I hope would be the cultural change that would come along with it in encouraging people to get on the buses rather than making those journeys in their cars every day, adding to congestion, adding to pollution, when there is, I think, an alternative to that, which is ultimately more environmentally friendly. So I congratulate Deputy Ward on proposing this amendment, and he has my wholehearted support.
Very much, Senator. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. So this Assembly adopted the Sustainable Transport Policy, and in doing so committed to reviewing the public transport service through the Bus Service Development Plan. This plan is the right process to shape the future of the bus service in a considered manner, rather than an ad hoc interventions which have unknown financial and service implications. I have no doubt that the Bus Service Development Plan will support further investment in our public transport network. This investment could provide extra journeys on existing routes, as well as connecting places not currently linked together by the established bus network. This could be achieved by increasing the frequency throughout the day, providing buses both earlier in the mornings and later in the evenings, and on Sundays when in some areas are not currently well served. This will further foster a culture of bus use, which in turn generates additional revenue to reinvest in the service to ensure it grows. So the Deputy's amendment plan does not align with the objectives of the bus service development plan. The amendment brings with it an increased net cost of operating the bus network, which is not budgeted, does not represent good value for public money, and undermines the safety net put in place to protect the bus service from adverse impacts of COVID. By proposing to use public funds to make it cheaper for some passengers to use the service, the bus service would in fact be starved of income it needs to maintain and grow the service. Without customer fare revenue growth to supplement government funding, the ability to expand services to meet demand will always be constrained, either resulting in overcrowding caused by insufficient capacity, or even the removal of less popular but socially important routes. In theory, making public transport fares free or very cheap should lead to a reduction in private motor vehicle use, in turn easing traffic congestion and reducing air pollution. But in practice, studies in locations where these policies have been put in place have found disappointing reductions in traffic levels, whilst the public funds required to provide the increased demand spiral in the years after implementation. Every pound of public money spent on reducing bus fares further below break-even level is a pound that cannot be invested in the service itself. Public funds invested in the bus service should, wherever possible, benefit the greatest number of service users. These include increased frequencies, additional routes, enhanced hours of operation, replacement of fleet, green technology, to name but a few. Starving the public transport network of the funds required to cater for increased demand and encourage shift away from private motor vehicle use to provide fare-free travel is simply not compatible. So at present, the students' fare is heavily subsidised. The cost is £4.26 per passenger, and the fare charged is to students is 85p. So there's a cost to the taxpayer of £3.41. That's 80% of that fare is paid by the taxpayer. And some of the revenue comes back because obviously we pay for senior citizens passes. They have worked for that all their lives, and that is their right. Disability passes, and indeed the carer passes, which I signed off recently. There are many, many reasons why people like to use the bus. There's many, many reasons why students decide not to use the bus. Not many of it is regarding the 85p. Many parents who work in town, for instance, and live in the countryside, decide to take their young students with them to school if they're coming into town and drop them off on the way. That's also accounted, if you like, as family time. It does cause congestion, so that is a problem that we need to address. But that is one of the many factors. Plus, obviously, if you're on the school bus, you may have to change between regular service and a traditional school bus. So there's sometimes a delay in getting to school. Lots of students, for instance, don't like to get up early in the morning to maybe take an hour, 20 minutes to get to school. that is a problem of logistics, and also many young students have mopeds which they need to get to school. And there are also lots of problems regarding the shorter journeys to school. If it's free, more people may use it who wouldn't necessarily use it if they're walking to school or indeed riding a bicycle. They might think, oh, well, look, no, I'll catch the bus, it's going up the hill. You know, there's many reasons why people use the buses and many reasons why they do not. And all this will come out in the review that we have planned later. I'll leave it there, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Conetabus and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. I think I will start by saying that I caught the bus from St Brelade's to town from the age of 7 during my school years, and the experience was that we had, I think it was weekly Rover tickets, which got clipped by the conductor, probably in those days, and cost probably something like 10 shillings, which gives the age away a bit. I was interested to hear from the Minister just now talking about a bus service development plan, and in truth, perhaps I ought to have done, but I hadn't heard of that. I have had the experience of working with Connex and working up the early part of the existing contract with Liberty Bus in conjunction with the present Minister. So have been through quite a few of the ramifications and possibilities and options with regard to what can be done, balanced by, of course, the costs involved. For my part, I would be reluctant to support this as opposed to increasing frequencies. I think increased frequencies are far more important and are more likely to get people out of their cars. We, of course, know that many people, school children, will get the bus. Others will share a ride with their parents, perhaps, who are going to work, or other children's parents who are picking them up. And there may be an exchange of rides, should we say, to school, and others will bring them back. And it's not unusual, and certainly when my children were small, that's what we did. It was really for convenience, and it worked for us. One of the things that's often concerned me, and it did in the time when I was more involved, so was the management of school buses with the schools. And at that time, and I think it's still the case, at the beginning of a term, a number of school buses based on past experience would be supplied to a school. And it was always uncertain as to how these would be filled until later in the school term when patterns developed. And I always felt so that it would be far more sensible if there were to be a commitment from parents to a school bus service to identify actually what the need was, because I have a suspicion that a lot of school buses perhaps aren't as full as they might be, whereas others may be overfull. But there seemed to be a disconnection between the schools and the bus services, and we have to be corrected on that if that has changed since my time. There are two elements of this. One is cost, and the other is getting people out of their cars, as is suggested by Deputy Ward. It is a balance like all these things. The other point, of course, is in terms of the ability to identify data. Now, I'm surprised that we are unable still to identify data. It struck me that with smart ticket machines these days, which all buses have, that we should be able to do that. Should we be doing more on the allocation of bus tickets, cards, Avanci cards, or whichever student cards is deemed appropriate, to actually have more information on them so it could be easily gleaned by the bus service? I'm well aware, sir, at a previous visit put up by one of the parking machine people to Swindon, it was, we were told that the sensitivity of these machines is quite important, because if it's turned up too much, the bus can go past a queue of people at a bus stop and take £1 off each of them without them even knowing. So I think technology these days has moved to the extent where I'm surprised that we are not able to get the data. I think, and I will say now that the principle is right, but the the unavailability of data puts me off. And voting for something which is going to be a bit vague in the effects on the bus service is not ideal. I know Deputy Ward is concerned about the bus service not providing value for money and Liberty Bus extorting money from the people of Jersey for the benefit of others, but I don't feel that is the case. We do need to invest into electric or hybrid or hydrogen buses or whatever comes next, and there will be a cost to that, which I'm aware that Liberty Bus have to fund out of their income. I suppose really the truth is there's too much vagary to the proposal as put, but I wouldn't say I shouldn't support it in the future, but I don't think I can support at this point. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Conattab of St Helier.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Ward was commendably brief in his presentation of his amendment, and I'm going to be equally brief in my comments about it. Senator Mezek, who spoke first, commended the deputy for his innovative approach to sustainability, and he's absolutely right insofar as Deputy Ward brought the extremely important proposition that Jersey should declare a climate change emergency, having first brought it to the St Helier Parish Assembly. And I continue to admire the approach of Deputy Ward to that. But Senator Mezek is wrong when he gives this particular amendment as an example of an understanding of sustainability, because as I've said before in my interventions, when Deputy Ward has promoted bus travel and free bus travel for young people, it's simply not true to say that this is the best use of funding for sustainable transport. If we really want to benefit young people who want to move around the island safely and independently, the best thing we can spend our money on is making walking and cycling safe. At the moment, Jersey, in particular, crossing the capital to get to school is an unsafe business for everyone, not just for young people, but for the elderly and people with ordinary mobility. And we really need to be prioritising, and actually the Minister for Infrastructure needs to be putting far more resources into making walking and cycling safer, particularly cycling, because we know that people are being struck by cyclists. Members, St Helier deputies have been dealing with a particularly sad case that occurred recently in the north of the parish. And we want a cycling strategy from the Minister, and we want resources put into separating cyclists from pedestrians so that cyclists can get from A to B, so that children can get from home to school and back again on bicycles, rather than necessarily using a school bus service. Let's face it, walking and cycling, if you can do it, is better for your health than getting on a bus. And that's why I can't support the allocation of precious resources into this particular area, while walking and cycling remain areas which need much more investment. Thank you, sir.
Much, Conattab. Deputy Sutton.
Thank you, sir. And, oh gosh, this takes me back. Hearing the Constable St Helier give his usual argument that we should do less rather than do more if our walking facilities are inadequate or cycling facilities are less than adequate. We should stop buses altogether, perhaps, as the logic that he presents. Yet he does it time and time again. When I were a lad growing up, I used to live in Formby, which is a very pleasant dormitory town just outside Liverpool. And I actually used to go to school on the train. Mersey Rail is sitting there between Southport and Liverpool, and we were Formby about halfway there. So what I was offered for my grammar school education was Waterloo Grammar, which was in Waterloo, very close, beyond Crosby, very close to Liverpool.
That required me taking the train. But since it was such a distance, it was something like 10, 11 stops, I think, along the way, this little 11-year-old received a subsidy. Okay, there was a bus pass. And that got you free transport to this relatively distant grammar school. And that principle that families should be supported if we're going to have to transport them into school is a valid one. It was valid 50 plus years ago because Merseyrail used to do that, exactly that. And it should be our principle now. We have to get things moving. I have heard, I've been in this chamber 20 years. I keep saying this until it's 25 years, perhaps. And I've heard this argument about increased frequency, increased cleanliness, increased efficiency, blah, 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 blah. The reality is it's still very difficult to get to town and back from Trinity, St. John, etc. Heard it for years, and the service hasn't really improved. Marginally at the edges, perhaps. But we have to inculcate the next generations with a desire that travelling by bus is A, normal, B, comfortable, C, something the next generation wants to do. Because we haven't got that. And there are several ways to have a debate like this. One is to take the big issues and debate them and have them knocked back again by people who don't want to move. The other way is to make the most modest adjustment you can in order that the objections maybe fall away to what you want to do as progressive, and you maybe get something back, something through. In this case, I look at this proposition and look how it's hedged in, assess it, find out what the cost is early on, not commit the next set of ministers. A very, very modest proposal. Surely the time has come in the last 20 years to make one of the changes that might make a difference in the long term. I urge members to vote for this proposition.
Deputy Connétable Jean.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to join the popular sport of bashing Liberty because I think that since they've been here, Liberty are doing a fantastic job. I disagree with the previous speaker in terms of not much improvement. There's been a lot of improvement. For example, St. John's has 32 buses a day that leave the church and head to town, which is a far better service than we had for many, many years. When I first joined the state, sir, my first bus journey to town, there were 12 people. On Tuesday of this week, sir, there were 25 people on the 750 number 5 into town. Interestingly, not many youngsters, but on the 1750 going back, there were quite a number of youngsters on that bus who had obviously been doing after school activities. And there is capacity on most bus routes. Perhaps the late bus out of St Albans and Gorey are full, but there is a lot of capacity that could be utilised without additional cost to the operator. And so therefore, we're not sure how much this will cost, but it's a trial that's been proposed with data being collected and reported back upon. Like my Connétable friend from St Bullards, I used to live in St Peter's and get 2 buses to school when I went to school at St Saviour's primary school. So getting on a bus early is a good thing to do. It's about habits. It's about getting people used to that form of transport. The Islanders are paying 6 pence a litre, and that's soon to go up towards environmental initiatives. I would have hoped that the Minister would have brought an amendment to this proposition rather than to oppose it, so that we could actually find solutions. All too often we say no. We don't say, what if we could do something different? How can we make this work? How can we put children first? It's a trial. If children like using a bus, you may be surprised, but they could encourage their parents to use a bus as well. When we introduced recycling in St. John's many, many years ago, we targeted the school because we knew that the children would convince their parents far better than we could convince the parents to recycle. And as we're going through encouraging more people again to recycle, that is again our focus. Encourage the youngsters to encourage the parents. So when you attended St. John's in the summer with the Royal Court, the chef de police had great pride in telling you how quiet it was in St. John's because he thought most of the youngsters got on the bus and went to town. And that's perhaps as true. So I agree with the Constable of St. Helier. We've got to find solutions to get people across town, either on a bike or walking. And I've written about this in the past. We are very poor. I'm pleased that there are some improvements getting done at long last on the cycle track, but we need to do more for sustainable transport. And this is one potential solution. IHE have got an opportunity to do something positive. I recently chased up the road markings for the new speed limit in St. John's, and I was shocked to get a response that said, these, I believe, are due to be done in the new year once the road sign and marking team have finished the town Christmas lights. So road safety, new speed limits, to encourage people to cycle and walk in the area at Zion. The road markings won't be done until the Christmas lights are switched off in January. That doesn't make sense to me. I hope it doesn't make sense to anyone else. We should be talking about cycle buses. How can we get primary school children onto cycle buses? I'd love to introduce that in St. John's. I would urge members to support this trial. It is a trial. It's an opportunity to see what can be achieved. Let's look for solutions, not reasons not to do things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Koitab. Deputy Gila.
Sorry, trying to get all this. Can you hear me?
Yes, Deputy, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just a couple of things. One of them is in response to Deputy Sarsen's speech, the fact that we already extremely heavily subsidize school journeys. Not only they pay a tiny fraction of the cost of a normal bus fare, but also it's a home to school fare. So even if they have to change buses, they don't pay again. So that's already something that we do and that we have done for many years. It's not it doesn't need to be brought on as an emergency. The other thing is that we would probably welcome this if we could have a chat with Deputy Ward, because we have put £1.5 million in the carbon neutrality roadmap on bus services to do exactly that sort of things, to experiment with what would be best, what would improve the use of buses by the public. So if we could have that chat with Liberty Bus, because they cannot be left out and just being told what to do. They are a commercial company that has a contract with us. So if we could have that chat with the government, which has now put the money aside for this, the money is there, and Deputy Ward, we would probably get much quicker to his goal than by asking the Assembly to find money out of nowhere to do something. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Tellier.
Thanks, sir. I want to tackle this from a slightly different angle, and that's to look at age discrimination, sir. This Assembly passed laws about all sorts of discrimination, banning it, and also putting in positive measures that we as a government, but also other societal bodies should have in place, and what good practice and best practice should look like. And I just want to start with, I suppose, a fact is that we give OAPs, so that is to say anybody over the age of 65, the ability to have free bus travel. We do that irrespective of whether they're wealthy or whether they're poor or somewhere in the middle. We do that irrespective of whether they've got a driving license, irrespective of whether they're able-bodied or not. we give all of them access to a free bus pass as soon as they turn 65. I've not heard anyone say that we should abolish that. I've not heard anybody say that that's not well targeted. I've not heard anybody say that we can't afford to do that or it's the wrong thing to do. And remember, we're talking about a group of people who are not homogenous. They all have different situations, different needs and different backgrounds. But a lot of them, let's face it, will be able-bodied, certainly in their younger years, hopefully, and hopefully increasingly now in their older years. Some of them will have a car and they will be able to drive the car, and they will also be able to afford to put the fuel in their car. Some of them may have electric vehicles. They may also afford and be able to afford to recharge those electric vehicles and to plug them in at their homes where they've installed electric charging points. Someone under the age of 18 is very unlikely to tick any of those boxes. They're probably not rich. They certainly won't have access to their own wealth under 18. They'll probably be in full-time education of some kind. And if they're not, good luck to them, because they'll be working somewhere in the island, having left school at the age of 16. They won't probably be able to drive if they're under 18, and they won't necessarily want to take the decision to drive that early. They'll be looking at the state of the world. They'll be thinking, okay, we've declared a climate emergency. We know there's a climate emergency. We are trying to reduce our carbon footprint as young people because we're going to feel the brunt of all the generations that exist. And we want to make a change. So I think simply one of the strong arguments for me has always been to do with treating people equally. And we know that as a group, under 18s, they often get a bad rap. You know, we often will hear about the, I think, very isolated incidents of bad behaviour, which tend to dominate sometimes in the public consciousness and in the media and on social media. But we know that most young people are dealing with a very difficult and complex world that even some of us who are, let's say, in our 40s didn't have to deal with when we were growing up. It was a completely different world. And I think that if we can do it for one section of society at that end, and I think we should, by the way, I think the pensioners bus pass is something we should be proud of as an island. It's not something we should be getting rid of. I think we also need to consider a much more targeted benefit, which isn't free, by the way. These people will still have to pay for it, these young people. So it's not a case of I'll go and collect it, but then not use it, because you have to cough up something initially. And even though it's a small amount, it is nonetheless psychologically important, I think, for them to do that. And what I would say to the Constable of St Helier, I don't completely disagree with him. It's not that I or anyone else wants to get lots of people travelling by bus routinely. It's just the fact that we recognise that in terms of the transition from a car addicted and private car focused island and community, in order to break that habit, you need to give people, especially young people, the option of easily and cheaply getting around by other methods apart from the car. And of course that will include walking, of course it will include cycling. It may even include scooters, you know, these electric scooters, if we can finally get our head round about how to accommodate them and how to police them, and what kind of community we want to be. But let's be realistic about this. And for some reason, in preparing for this debate, I was drawn to what was a quite engaging and in some ways divisive island-wide debate about Plymouth. And I voted to secure the Plymouth headland and to give the National Trust money, co-funded money, in order to buy that land, because I thought it was really important. But there were some really good arguments made in that debate about the two-tier society, the country versus the town. And in reality, if you are a poor, or I'm using these terms in broad brush, so I don't want to offend anyone, but if you're a poor family living in central St Helier or in St Clement, and you need to get up to Plymouth because you want to have a look at the great work that the National Trust have done in preserving the coastline there. But are you going to get up there? Are you going to say, okay, kids, let's get on our bikes today and cycle from the Skye up to Plymouth and enjoy the headland? You may well do that, but it's probably unlikely. And speaking to some teacher friends of mine only in the last few weeks, one of them came out with a story about when they took somebody to, and it sounds unbelievable. They said that they took a child to the beach as part of an outing, and this was somebody at secondary school. And they said that the child had never been to the beach in Jersey, and that at first they weren't sure how the other children were going to react. Were they going to tease them? Were they going to, you know, bully them? Were they going to say, oh, that's crazy, how can you have not been to the beach? But they were very gentle with this particular child. They said, because imagine discovering the beach for the first time in Jersey, how much of wonder that, and we fail to recognize sometimes that there, even in a small island, that there are small communities, small pockets of, yes, poverty, but also people go amongst about their daily lives, and they don't get out and about because simply you don't see beyond your street, and if you're working a couple of jobs, you may not travel. And I think this is a small gesture, which we are in a wealthy island where we can afford to give out 100, is it 100 million pounds we gave away in the cards, or when we gave people, there you go, there's £100 to go and spend as you want. We've no idea whether it's going to make any difference to the economy, but it's a nice thing to do. But when we come up with a suggestion to say, let's target this, does it tick the boxes for putting young people first? Yes, it does. Does it tick the boxes for trying to change the way we deal with public transport, about sustainable transport? Yes, it does. It supports Liberty Bus, actually, because this will be something that they'll benefit from as well. In the longer term, they'll have committed customers who want to get on the buses and who are used to using it, because when it comes to bus ridership, it's all about habit. As soon as you've done it once or twice, a bit like voting, once you've done it once or twice, you realise actually it's not that bad, it's quite fun. And certainly travelling on the bus, that is. And you can do other things when you're on the bus. You can read, you can listen to your podcasts, you can talk to your friends, and you can arrange your social life. I think that there are so many positives in this. And in a week when we're rightly debating some probably quite divisive and some different visions in terms of ideology, I don't think this needs to be one of those areas where we're fighting each other. We should be able to say to our young people, yes, we will support you in this trial scheme. Liberty Bus, yes, we will also support you in the work and the service that you're delivering, but delivering on behalf of the government of Jersey for its own people. And we can say at the same time to the pensioners, yes, we value you as well. We're going to keep your pension bus pass in place, but also we recognise that we need to be doing something for our young people in this island, and this is a tangible and a real way to actually help them, sir. Thank you
very much. Conataba St Martin.
Thank you, sir. If we want to encourage less cars at school gates, if we wish to help the environment, then please vote for this. It helps a sustainable transport policy. It will alleviate congestion at school drop-off and pick-up times, which has to be good. I know that there's been some detractors of Liberty Bus. I think the Liberty Bus has provided a much better service than we previously had on the island. And having this trial is not detracting from how good they are. In answer to those who keep saying that children and teenagers should all walk and cycle to school, ideally, yes, that would be perfect. But try and take all your sports kit, your cookery basket and your art folder, etc. on a bike from St Martin into school. It's not always possible. Please support this. It's a trial. We will be moving forward rather than standing still. Thank you.
Very much, Conataba. Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll cover a couple of points here, but I'm going to start where I'm going to finish. Where's the money going to come from for this? That's the one thing that we're going to see a lot with a couple of amendments that are going to be going on till late tonight, is no identification of where this is. Nothing's actually free in these kind of things. They do have to be funded from somewhere. That money will need to be spent here and not somewhere else. So when there's been no identification of where that somewhere else is, and it'll be a running theme today that I think I'll say a lot, which is, what do you want us not to spend the money on to spend it here? Because that's really what this is about. It's about proper governance and fiscal responsibility, which is when the government plan comes out, or the MTFPs before, it's always the case of I want the government to prioritise this more, and it's going to cost money, so I need to decide what I want to deprioritise. So do we not spend more money on arts and culture? Do we not spend more money on mental health? Do we not spend more money on sport? Or do we raise taxes? Or I mean, the proposal could have come in and said, we're going to do free buses for all under 18s, but we're going to double the fare for everyone else. Would that have been popular? I don't think that would have got as many likes on Facebook. So the first thing is, why has there been no identification of what we don't want to spend money on to do this? To say it's just a trial is all good and well, but we all know, and nobody can kid themselves, once you make something free, you can't put the charges back on. You wouldn't do it for prescriptions, for instance. They're free, they'll be free forever. Nobody will ever bring a proposition to this assembly in the future to say, do you know what, this is costing a lot of money. Let's actually, and we're giving away all of these prescriptions like they're candy. Let's try and do something about it and put a charge back on, so that it's just like, so very much. Let me turn my volume down. I think that's causing a problem. Very much, where's the money going to come from? A trial is never really going to be a trial. Once you make it free, it will be free. This will go on for the future, and I've got a lot of sympathy for this proposition, sir, certainly as the children minister, but also in my own life. I mentor and look after a young lad who probably phones me up twice a day to ask for a lift somewhere, and if he got if it was free for him to get his bus, I probably wouldn't have that phone call, and it'll be good for him. By the way, it's his birthday. If you let me say happy birthday to him. He won't be listening because he'll be in bed, but very much the same happy birthday. I will miss those journeys that I drive him to his friends or into town, or pick him up and we have a chat and we talk. But he'll get the bus. So I've got a lot of sympathy for this. Will it stop parents driving to school? I don't think so. I think a lot of reason that parents drive their children to school and back is because of maybe the bus routes don't go near, or they've got after school clubs. They go and do gymnastics, or they do something. I know my nieces do gymnastics and all sorts of different activities that are all over the island. So my stepsister goes and drives them off. My brother drives them off all up to St Mary's and St John's and everywhere to after school to go and take them directly to their after school activities. So the bus wouldn't actually change in that way. A lot of parents, certainly for school activities, will still carry on doing what they're doing. We'd only stop that by disincentivising the driving rather than re-incentivising somewhere else. So I've got to say, sir, certainly as children's minister, certainly in my own life, I have an awful lot of sympathy for this proposition. I don't think it will be the changes that we're talking about. I don't think it'll be a trial. I don't think you could possibly turn around and say, well, this didn't work. But how much money does it cost? We don't know how much money it costs. We don't know if we'll have to put on more buses. We don't have to buy more buses to be able to deal with capacity or not. So I guess in a trial we will work it out. But where does the money come from? What do members of this assembly, because nothing's free, what do they want to deprioritise in their spending in this government plan to afford whatever cost this is? And we don't know how much it will be. We don't know at all how much it will be, but are you willing to sacrifice other areas that you're interested in making sure that we get better on? Because we're spending a lot of money on areas that have been underfunded for a very long time to try and bring them up to scratch. But we've got to make sure we know where our priorities are. If the deputy, and this is going to be a lot, the deputy can at some point tell me where he doesn't want spending and where this money should come from, because it's vague in every amendment except one that the deputy has brought forward. Don't know where the money's going to come from, just want to spend it. Where's the money coming from, sir? I'll leave it at that.
Very much, Deputy St. Peter.
And thank you, sir. I mean, again, this is one of those propositions I really want to support. It ticks all the boxes except one that is fundamental. I said it on both the last times this has been debated, and I'll say it again. The reason I didn't support it was because the proposer hadn't spoken to Liberty Buses. And it appears this is the case again. We have a recurring theme, sir, in this assembly. We invite businesses, be it arm's length or private enterprise, to deliver services on our behalf. These businesses invest time, resource and money against a clear business plan. And we as an assembly seem set on changing these plans for tactical gains without even asking the provider if the proposition is feasible. This is not only unprofessional, sir, but I would suggest it's actually disrespectful to these providers. So what can happen next? Everybody in this assembly is very impressed with the work Evie are doing to deliver government policy, which is aligned with our sustainable transport policy. So are we going to have a proposition that Evie give free use of e-bikes to school children without even speaking with them? In this case, sir, all I'd like to have heard is that Liberty Buses have been consulted, had accepted that the plan was feasible, and is supported by recommended outcomes. This could potentially mean subsidy however much pounds per annum for the Treasury Minister to deliver the service. It could mean Liberty have to invest in more buses and staff, but at least we will know exactly what will happen and what the revised service will look like. We can then vote on facts, clearly understand how the young of the island will benefit in a sustainable way. And if compromises or investments has to be made, clearly understand what they are. So sorry, sir, we must learn to work in a collaborative way. It will result in better outcomes. So regrettably, it's a contra from me.
Thank you very much, Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure that most of the state's members are aware about carrot and stick motivation approach. And we have a goal. We would like people to use public transport more. And we have lots of sticks, like we're talking about tax on fuel, we talk about road tax, we have several other ideas. And this is small, I would say, carrot. Let's try to see if youngsters would use more buses. And as Constable of St. John said, maybe parents will come as well. For me, Deputy Lewis, our infrastructure minister, said, yeah, we have adopted sustainable transport policy and we are developing. Yeah, for the last 2 years, we haven't seen much from the development. I agree with my Constable of St. Helier, because we dealt with cyclist behavior on St. Helier roads, and I don't think that it's either or, walking, cycling or buses. I think it should come together. And one thing I agreed with our education minister, and this was the only one thing, it's nothing comes free. It's right. Where's the money coming from? I would suggest maybe he can discuss this with Deputy Guido, that actually said we do have some funds, and invited Deputy Ward to speak. I would wish that the government would speak with Deputy Ward before and would brought some amendment to allow the trial. Data. I support the personal Deputy Ward amendment because last year, and I think if we would vote for his amendment last year, we would have a data by now we had some funds remained in the climate emergency fund that we didn't spend this year. If we would spend money on this trial, we would have clarity how much funds are required. And we would make decision evidence-based, maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know how I would vote because I don't know what evidence would be presented in front of me if we would vote for the trial last year. I personally think the money can be found from climate emergency fund. As the Constable St. John said, the bus is not full. We don't need increased capacity. We actually don't know. And it's about time that we start to do small steps to understand really what's required and try and changing the behavior and bringing people to the public transport. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Massel.
Thank you, sir. I just want to bring members back to the actual wording of the proposition, because a lot of speeches have concentrated on on school transport, which of course is important. But this, just to remind members that this structure is for anyone under the age of 18 years to pay an annual £20 fee to the bus company for any bus journey. So it's not just school transport, it's for any use. Now that in itself may not be a bad thing, but I think, you know, members have just been talking about bus school access. It's not just about school access. So we just need to bear that in mind. So we're looking at quite a significant number of bus journeys throughout the island, which will deprive Liberty Bus of various revenues. And we've seen on the figures that, you know, even though there will be a £20 fee, Liberty Bus is looking at a shortage of about £500,000, possibly £700,000, depending on how it all works out. And there is no solution as to where that money is coming from. So if there's a change to the contract, then the states will have to pay for it. And no member here, from what I've heard from speeches so far, has indicated where is that money going to come from? What else aren't we going to do in order to pay for this? So the proposal isn't complete. And can I just say, as a St Saviour representative, while we have the most number of schools in our parish, you've got to remember one thing. First of all, we don't have buses to primary schools. So actually, those members who are concerned about reducing the number of car journeys, this isn't going to be a solution to that. And also, where we've got non-catchment schools like we do in St Saviour's, where there isn't always a direct bus route, are you suggesting to me that those parents who currently drive their children to school are suddenly going to put them on buses instead? Not going to happen. We know how it works in St Saviour's. Those individuals choose to do so already. So, but does that mean that this policy ideal is not desirable? And actually, on a point of principle, I think it absolutely does have some merit. And it's very, very alluring from Deputy Ward in this case. But again, I need to know where the money is coming from in order to pay for this. I need to know that it's effective in its desired outcomes, because there's a lot of rhetoric and not much evidence. And also, sir, again, with Deputy of St Peter said, you know, I have no evidence that Deputy Ward has properly sat down with representatives from Liberty Bus about this particular proposal and the implications that it will have on Liberty Bus itself. So, sir, this has some good parts to it, but isn't completely baked, and therefore, sir, I'm unable to support, and I won't be taking a point of clarification. Thank you.
Sorry, did you say that you won't be taking a point of clarification?
Correct.
Right, very well. Then Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief. I just slight issue with Deputy Tadier, who was stating, sir, that the government found 12 million to spend on the Spend Local card, and he was correct. We did, and he was also right in saying that it was to try to help the economy, and we had no knowledge whether it really would or not. We hoped it would, and I think it did. But he's right, there was no guarantee it would. And to that extent, Deputy Ward's amendment is the same. He's hoping that people get back on buses. They may not. If he's successful, let's hope they do. But he has no way of knowing whether they will or not either. So Deputy Tadier is right in his assertion on the Spend Local card. But there are two major differences, sir, between this and the Spend Local card. The Spend Local was a one-off payment, sir. It was not a reoccurring cost. That is to say, it was not going to happen every single year. Well, I hope it won't, because I hope we're going to soon get through COVID. And the second major difference, sir, is that we knew exactly how much that Spend Local card was going to cost. Deputy Ward, with his amendment here, has no idea at all of what it's going to cost. And that, for me, working in the Treasury, is a major, major difference. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment, the Sixth Amendment? Deputy Martin.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm trying to understand exactly what Deputy Ward is trying to do. The word is, I think, more. I'm trying to understand who he's actually trying to help. I listened to Deputy Tadier said, you know, most youngsters don't have their own money. Correct. Some don't. Some have quite a good pocket money, and they do odd jobs, and they do things around the home for their parents, and they get money. I was also tempted to speak after my constable, sir. What are we actually trying to achieve? Because when I've actually dropped off the child from this end of St Saviour, who went to the old Oak Tree School, I would never go to the school gates. It would literally be only in inclement weather, sir. It would only be at the top of St Saviour's Hill or the bottom, and he walked the rest of the way, because I was never getting into that, you know, bumper to bumper. But if he had a free bus pass and he knew his mates were getting on, there was a little bit of a walk for him. Would he want to be in with the crowd? Because youngsters do that. And then he wouldn't have been getting the, you know, doing that 2 bus stops walk, or actually I think only 1 bus stop walk. But lots of people do that. They drop at the bottom of Wellington here when the children, youngsters walk up, and it really is quite a bit of good exercise. We all know with the school curriculum, they don't do anything like we used to do when an hour a day on games, and you know, so much more sport actually in your day, not after school. It was brilliant, but with the more learning, the things they have to learn, that doesn't happen. Deputy Tadier said as well, you know, if a youngster wants to go to see a heritage like Clermont, yes, he may be able to go with his friends, but if it was a family outing, are the family going to say, well, we'll come on the bus with you, or you come in the car with us? I just think if this isn't worked properly, we could end up with mum and dad, or mum or dad, still doing the school trip because they work in town, or if it's the other way round, they're coming from town and going to the school out of Kennervay, and we would need more buses to fulfil possibly a couple of stops, because we've got no sort of test here. In the UK, you have to live to get any help, and with that pass that Deputy Southern was, and I've seen them mark it out. It's 3 miles, 0.3 miles, and if you live over that, you get a subsidy, absolutely. But if you don't, and it's normally on the bus service, it's not a school bus, but you get a subsidy. So I just don't know who we're trying to help. And again, I suppose it is, everyone says, where's the money coming from? But it's just every child under a certain age, they pay £20, and we might see if it works. But the real, and I didn't know this, because I know Deputy Ward is passionate about this, and I will never knock him for that. And I didn't know to this debate that he hadn't spoken to Liberty Bus. I don't even know if he spoke to the ministers, but you know, that's fair. If you don't want to speak to the minister, fine. But the operator, just to see. Now, there might have been a better way to do this. They are the operator, they're the experts. They may have been able to work with him, something workable that had come to the Transport Minister, etc., and got something that he really wants to do. But to me, again, I can't define who I'm helping. Is it children with, less money, for families with less money? Is it in general? Is it to go and see the heritage? Is it to free up the school? People get more people on the bus. I just think it won't, and it's more buses. Kids will do less walking, and if it doesn't go through today, Deputy Ward, next time really do your homework and speak to the Liberty Bus. I'm sure they can help you, and you'll get something that we could all get behind, and it will really help. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deb. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Connétable of St Mary.
Thank you, sir. If we are to encourage less car use, then surely a free bus service for everyone would be beneficial to encourage use. Walking and cycling is okay on a fine day, but scholars and everyone else need to make journeys taking kit or shopping and items of all description, sometimes in very inclement weather. Or it may be that they have a medical condition which prevents them walking and cycling. If we only make a 50% change in people's behaviour, it would be a massive start. If we are to take climate change and congestion seriously, then a free bus service for all would be beneficial. Cost for this could come from the climate change budget, which we have all committed to. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Connétable. Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. I think where I want to start, sir, is I frequently have encounters with visitors to our island in official capacity, obviously less so in the last few months whilst we've been coming out of or dealing with pandemics, and obviously during the course of last year. But prior to that, so when the bus service was operating well, I had a number of occasions, for example, if I was speaking at a function, and actually where people have come up to you afterwards, absolutely, no reason to do, if that makes sense, but really just complimenting us, Jersey, about the bus service that we have. They were very complimentary about the punctuality, about the cleanliness, and the value for money, essentially. And I think one of the overall things, the reason I say that, sir, because somewhere in some of the speeches, there have been, not all of them, there have been sometimes inferences that people don't recognise the fact that we actually do have a good, well-run bus service. And I really want to lay that down. It was very clear, and I've said this publicly previously, sir, that I think bus ridership has gone up more than 40% under the present operator compared to the previous one. And I can recall actually serving under Deputy Lewis when he was Minister for what was then TTS, when we were working on the new bus contract was coming in, and there was all sorts of disruption disputes going through with the handover, that there were various practices and processes that the present operator was uncovering, which frankly made your eyes water. But I think the fundamental one being is that settled down. You have an incredibly good system now, and one that actually people who have got experiences of bus services in other jurisdictions very much recognise as being an exemplar of how to operate one on a small island. And the crucial thing, I think the Connétable St John did actually reference it, it's about increasing the frequency and availability. Now, so in fact, I'm just going to turn that off to make the hope that helps on the sound quality a little bit. In terms of studies and evidence, and I do think actually the points that have been made that if Deputy Ward hasn't been down and spoken to the operator and to try actually find out about what the consequences of some of these things. I think if this doesn't go through this time round, and I will not be supporting it, that he should go and do that level of research. But certainly studies that in the past have been done in, I'm just trying to find the relevant page, sir, that have been done on changes or making bus ridership for certain categories free, have actually demonstrated the unintended consequences that have come through. And so, for example, sir, what has seen is that there's been a significant shift of walkers and cyclists. This is on they will be doing a shorter element of their journey, but the bus is obviously completing the longer journey. But basically, they will then hop on that bus and not walk or cycle, which actually makes the usage for other bus users in a way less attractive because it suddenly gets a lot more crowded. And you're trying to make it, and I'll come back to this, you're trying to make it an attractive experience as well as a not too expensive experience. But not too expensive is different to free. But the point being is that if it becomes free, you're then seeing the unintended consequence of cyclists and walkers, who are ultimately the most carbon neutral form of travel, actually ditching that mode, if that makes sense, and going on to a carbon generating form of travel. And that's not what one is trying to do here. There are a whole range of articles and studies that have been done on this. I was very tempted to quote from one or two, but I thought actually some of the language actually was a bit more in the vernacular than might be appropriate for the Assembly, actually. But they all hold up the fact, in fact, that whether it's Luxembourg, which recently went into free services, and then actually the inference from the articles I've seen is that it makes great politics, but it doesn't actually make much sense. And I think the point there is that price is only one factor in an individual's choice of transport. So in other words, pricing alone doesn't necessarily trigger the right type of behaviour that we want to see. And in an island which is wedded to the car, sometimes it's not about just making buses cheaper in certain areas. It's actually about making the alternative carbon forms of transport, and obviously in our terminology that's the car, more expensive, whether that's through parking charges or whether it's through the fuel or whatever it is. So the evidence states, sir, that this will not achieve the outcomes that the deputy is looking for. Separately, sir, I think Deputy Guida has already referred to the work that is meant to be taking place as a result of the carbon neutral strategy, and that is funded out of the Climate Emergency Fund. And then finally, sir, which members should be aware of, but obviously we have previously announced the Hopper Bus trial. The ministerial decision on that was signed some months ago. The buses are on order and subject to the usual things, particularly with Omicron variants coming through. It's meant to start sometime late spring of next year. So we are consistently trying to improve the bus offer overall. I would hope that should be welcomed by members, particularly of the public. I would hope of members of the Assembly. I do absolutely commend Liberty Bus and the present operator to members, and still think it would be very useful for members to have a full understanding, and if you like a presentation, we can always arrange that from Liberty Bus to explain how they operate. But it is one, that contract is highly beneficial to the island and has pre-COVID achieved significant improvements in the overall bus transport system. And on that basis, particularly based on the evidence that we've seen, what Deputy Ward does in his uncosted proposition or unfunded proposition essentially is unlikely to achieve the changes in transport behaviour that we should be seeking overall. On that basis, I really do encourage members not to be voting for this amendment, sir. Thank you.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the Sixth Amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. Had a bad start today, so I was a little bit cross, but one of the problems I have is I'm really rubbish at holding a grudge, which is why I never win an argument at home, but there you go. So I'd like to thank everybody for their contribution. It was relatively nice today, which is good to see. A much more thoughtful debate. Sorry, just to get my bits of paper together. I'll try to address as many people as I can, and I do hope that members will just give me a bit of their time and listen. I know we're very busy, but it will take me a little bit of time to go through things and just to close up in the way I wanted to. First of all, Sir Deputy Lewis, he talked about a plan that's being considered, and so unfortunately the evidence that we have there is that those plans mean inaction, because the plans are coming forward next year and then there's an election, and we've not really seen any tangible change. And so this is something that came up again and again, and obviously government members have been briefed in the approach that they'll take. But this is a separate issue between increasing frequency and this issue over under 18s travel. Yes, we need to increase frequency of buses. Yes, we need to have them along later into the day. That will mean looking at the bus contract, and we know that's not going to happen for another few years. So that argument put in here to try and negate the argument with the under 18 bus passes simply doesn't work. And I would urge members to really think that through. Do you really believe there's going to be any change to that in the foreseeable future? Because there isn't. And what he did not address was the cost for parents, and I'll talk about that in a moment to finish up. He did say protect the bus service. Now that's an interesting one, because public funds are used for the bus service, and the notion that it's £4.26 for a journey per child to 85p. I think it's probably easier if children got together and hired a Tantivy coach, to be quite frank. And I'd like to point out a couple of things regards costings. I have asked numerous questions about Liberty Bus and their costings and trying to get to the bottom of it. In written question 365/2020, the answer given by the Minister was that HCT's group's stated aim is to use profits they make from operating commercial contracts to fund charitable activities and community reinvestment in the local authority areas their subsidies are based. We are not one of those local authority areas. No information other than HCT Group subsidiaries is held, as this is not relevant to the performance of the Jersey Bus operating contract. So we have absolutely no idea how much or where the monies from Liberty Bus profits go, but they do make a profit. And we are putting in significant amounts of money as COVID recovery in the last few years, millions of pounds. So in written question 427 in 2021, the answer was there was no specific annual return written into the bus contract. The contract places the revenue risk on HCT Group as the operator, with their reward for agreeing to take this commercial risk being the ability to earn profit from its operations of the Jersey public transport network. So, sir, in terms of costings and where money is, rather than how are we paying for it, the big question is, where is the money going? Why is the subsidy so great? And can we not control that subsidy from government? Because we should certainly, surely have a say in where that money, that taxpayers' money, is spent on our behalf. And it seems that we don't have that. And members have sat there or stood there or whatever, wherever they are, and said, oh, but we need to do something about the costings and where the money's coming from. So they're not considering where the money's going. This seems to be a leaking of cash from this island, and they're absolutely happy for it to happen. Now, I'm not happy for that to happen, sir. Now, in terms of costings, let's talk about costings, shall we? In written question 186 in 2019, it states that it is not possible to provide an exact figure relating to the cost of running the bus school service or the bus service as a whole. So the minister has no idea how much it costs, but he's providing a subsidy for it anyway. But let's move on. So, Constable Jackson, the frequency is a separate issue. And he mentioned, I'm sorry, my notes were brief here, and I hope I will try to answer his points. The past would show a commitment from parents to the bus company to sending their children to school on the bus. And so it would give schools a better idea of how many people are travelling. And this is a trial. This is a trial to gather information, to give it a go, to see whether it actually works and how it can be made to work, how we can influence, and how we can help parents, how we can enable parents to not have the costs that I'll go through in detail later. So the Constable of St Helier, yet again, he fails to support an initiative which will actually make change in the name of a notion of better walking and cycling routes in St Helier that have not been there for years and years and years. It's a shame that he hasn't been there for a long time to make that happen. Actually, yes, he has. He's been there many years. So rather than bringing the things to actually make that happen, it just seems to be opposed to things that are brought by one of his deputies. So I urge the constable to think about this carefully. If we can encourage young people to travel to school on the bus or get that ability to travel around the island so they move around, might mean less cars on the road, which is a trigger for improving walking and cycling. So these things are linked together. This is not the solution to everything, but it's part of it. Deputy Savin, thank you for that. I was tempted to ask if his train was a steam train, but that is inappropriate, and I will not do that. Although I know that the deputy has a sense of humour. He is correct though, and I wish that members would listen more to the words that he's actually saying and consider that content. You do have to buy into this. We do have to make a change somewhere along the line. Lord Constable of St John, I'd just like to say thank you because you understand the proposition. You have taken time to read it and the report. And he's absolutely right in terms of the influence of children on families and changing their behaviour. It sounds slightly strange to say, right, what we're going to do is going to influence the children to do these things, but it's a great idea. It happened, one of the ways it happens in terms of smoking in the home. When I first started teaching many years ago, it was a real issue and children went home and you could see change. It's happened with recycling, it's happened with climate change, it's happening with all sorts, and getting children to encourage their parents to use the bus is a great idea. So I thank you. And so it's absolutely right about data, and then use this review. We do need to know, but this is very particular to this island. Deputy Guido, very strange. I would say that he's talked about us already subsidising so much. That means we've only got another little 15% to add to actually make a real significant change. So what he's spelt out, I think accidentally in his speech, is the point that actually this is a very small economic change compared to what we're already giving to provide a real change for parents and for children and for families. So I hope he rethinks his attitude. In terms of chatting, so I will say I do feel I've been actively excluded from the group that talks about climate change and the committee set up of members, and indeed so I have evidence from that in an email. So I'm more than happy to be involved, but unfortunately too often my face doesn't fit, which I get because I'm outspoken and a bit of a loudmouth, so I can understand that, sir. But that notion that I just don't bother is simply not the case. I have a lot of ideas to offer and I have a great understanding. So I would say that there is more to that. Deputy Teddy is correct, we travel. I want to make a really good point that he made, that he tried to spell out, and that we do at times look at young people as if they're a problem to us. We shouldn't. That is not my experience, and I've worked in some really challenging schools. And yeah, of course there's difficulties, but I tell you, I want to state this in this assembly for once and for all, of my pride in being associated for 20 years with the young people of this island, taking them off island on school trips, and the number of times young people represented this island and we were told, wow, your kids are wonderful, how well behaved they are, how polite they are. And so, sir, that is the young people that we have on this island, and that's the young people who are there on the bus. And a double-edged sword, sir, a young gentleman the other week offered me a seat on the bus. Now that's wonderful, but it made me feel old. And you know, it's a lovely thing. I also young people to help people on the bus with their prams and so on. Let's not demonise our young people. Let's give them an opportunity and let's give them a chance. And he was correct regards the £100 card. So the £100 card was not targeted. Reports have said that. And I think that the problem is with a scheme like that is that the government are happy to throw that money. They don't know whether it went into our economy. It's really difficult to track. But then at the same time, come back with this proposition and say, oh, you don't know how much it's going to cost. And then it leads us on to Deputy Wigginton. I sort of gleaned something from what he said. I would ask him to read the report, because do your homework, because I don't know if you have. The report states that we could raise up to £610,000 from the £20 charge. It's not free, there's a charge. And as a parent, I know what I would do. I would buy two, would have my children too old now, but I would have bought 2 passes and said, look, they're available for you to use. And that would have been an excuse for me to say, Dad, can I get a lift into town? No, use a bus pass I bought you. And so there would be sporadic use, but the money would have gone to Liberty Bus up front. And that's about 25 trips on the bus before you get your money back. So there is a revenue raising. And the other money is suggested, one, from the £3.75 million that has been given to Liberty Bus regards COVID recovery. I don't know if you've been on a bus recently or how many members have. They're all packed. When I get the bus in and when we travel around, I haven't been on an empty bus for a long time. So there are a detail there. And if you are concerned as Children's Minister in providing this, rather than come to the Assembly and just criticise in a way without actually reading the report properly, bring an amendment for the funding. Bring an amendment for the funding in the way that you could have done from all of the different funds that we have. And say, there we go, let's enable this to happen because it's the right thing for children. It's a shame that didn't happen. Deputy Hewlin, I'd like to remind you that Liberty Bus is a social enterprise provider, a registered charity. It's not like one of the businesses that you may have been involved in, which is purely there to raise profit for its shareholders and exploit as many people as possible to make money. It's a social enterprise provider. Look on its website. And indeed, sir, in the last interaction I had with Liberty Bus was regard an organisation on the island who wanted some help with something, and I met with them a number of times actually. They were really, really helpful. And we got to a solution regards the provision of a bus to a particular area that would help lots of people because they're a social enterprise provider. So I don't think they'd have such an issue with this. Their issue is just around a bit of funding. That's what the issue's around. And yes, I've spoken to them. Deputy Gardner, correct. And you're correct. I tell you what, Deputy Gardner, you're absolutely spot on. And I should have put this in my own speech, but you've reminded me. If this would have been accepted a year ago, we would have data now. We would know. Well, I could have come back and said, let's extend it. And we could have said, yes, it worked brilliantly. Let's do that. Or you could have stood up and said, actually, the data says don't do it because it didn't work, etc. But instead, what the government members have done is come back to the Assembly with just nothing really. Just this notion it's not going to work, we shouldn't even bother. Now that's a really negative approach. Deputy Masson, I've already spoken about how much money we're already providing. As a St Saviour rep, if you wanted buses for primary schools, perhaps you should have worked on that in your years in the Assembly rather than just leaving it. And I say to him again, more importantly, where is the money going that is going to Liberty Bus? Now, so this notion that by questioning that, and this is a very important part for this Assembly, by questioning where that money is going, and look at the questions we get all the time about money, quite rightly, that does not mean I'm saying Liberty Bus is not providing a good service or I don't support them. I use the bus myself. I give them £47 a month for my bus pass so I can travel around because I'm trying to consciously drive less and make an effort to use public transport. So that the notion that because you question, you want to do something different, it's like an either or method of politics which simply doesn't work. It's not intelligent, it's not thoughtful, it's not considered, and it's not sophisticated. And we need a more sophisticated approach to this. Deputy Ash, I think I've dealt with it. This is a really, compared to the spend local card, this is a relatively inexpensive move, and it would put money directly into the pockets of parents. I will come to that one in a moment. Deputy Martin, I'm not entirely sure what your speech did go through. Who will it help? It will help families. Some will still do the school trip, of course they will. This isn't a cure-all, but it will give an option. It will give an opportunity. It might mean that some families say to their children, use the school bus once or twice a week. Well, that's once or twice a week. We don't have a car on the road. So that's all I can say to that. Constable Abai, he's right. We do need to make a change. I'll just remind him, this is only a modest start. It's just for under 18s for a £20 bus pass. It's not free. Senator Lafondra, again, he's confusing increasing the bus service with this particular issue. He does not have evidence for this island as to whether or not this will work. He's got evidence from other jurisdictions and he's picking and choosing that evidence where it's appropriate for him to make his argument. I would desperately hope that he would change his mind and vote for this so that we can trial this out. So I think I've covered everybody, but I would like to finish. So this is not simply about changing travel habits or solving transport issues. No one change can do this, but it does send a clear message and create low-cost option of travel for our children. It is not free and does raise income for Liberty Bus, but it gives a freedom of travel that will drive a change in our habits. There are simple benefits. Travel to the new skate park, for example. Travel to meet friends, to enjoy the wonderful beaches of Jersey. Travel to part-time jobs. Lots of 16, even 15-year-olds have part-time jobs. And it's significant, their cost of travel there and back, out of their wages for the day. And cheaper travel for families rather than taking the car. And it does make a difference. I have had evidence and from people, which I'll talk about in a moment, which says, actually, if I want to take my family with my children, by the time I paid their fares there and back, it's actually cheaper for me to take the car and park in town. So we won't bother, we'll take the car. We could encourage families onto the bus. That experience, that confidence in the children, the ability for children to travel alone and have that independence is part of growing up. So many examples can be utilised and encourage a generation to have public transport as their go-to means of transport. And that's vital. And when children are 16, and I'm going to sound really old now, but when children are 16, so many of them get scooters, and I see them ride the scooters. I have a motorbike licence. I had a big bike licence, so I know about riding a motorbike on Jersey. And I see children on scooters, and it frightens me. And it frightens me because I'm going to sound like a granddad, even though I'm not. It frightens me that they don't wear the right clothing, the right protective clothing, and on a wet day, it puts them at risk. This might give them the option on a wet day of not taking that scooter and getting on the bus so that their safety improves just by a small amount. But all of these small amounts add up. So any future developments in a carbon neutral roadmap will have stronger foundations with the evidence we gain. That well-meaning initiative, the carbon neutral roadmap, will always face problems if it remains so much cheaper to transport a family into town by car than pay fares on the bus. So this amendment complements future change and provides data. But sir, there is a further financial reality that needs to be understood. I took the time to engage via social media, as I do have the have the resources of the government, the communications department. And I asked for real examples of costs incurred by families. And I've got to say, sir, that the number of replies I had would, I think, match many of the sort of quantity we get with a scrutiny report and perhaps with some government initiatives. So I'm going to take some time, and I really hope members will please listen and just give me a couple of minutes to read these so that you can see the response we've had. Some examples, so I'm not going to name them because I think it's I've got permission for them, but I'm not going to use name, although many of them may be on my Facebook site or anyway. My son gets two. This is one. My son gets 2 buses per day, then a normal bus home each day. Coming into winter and rainy days, he really does use that. Does use those. Being a single parent, a £20 would really help me make sure he's at school and dry for the day. My son spends £4 a day, £20 per week. £20 per week, sir. So it's I just need to switch on my laptop battery because it's just told me it's low. Next, I pay my granddaughter's bus fares to school as her student mum just can't afford it. It's £8.50 a week for the school attendance, plus any leisure. Next, our daughter will be using the school bus when she starts high school next year, and I'm genuinely worried about how we will pay for that. An annual pass for £20 would be a great, however, school children, in my opinion, should be able to travel for free. Okay, £8.50 a week for 2 trips to school and back, so £20 would make a huge difference. The 6th one. I currently have 2 children in secondary school who both use the school buses daily. Currently, this is costing around £600 for my family per year just to get to and from school. In addition, during the school holidays and at weekends, both use the buses to travel around the island. So I would estimate that my outlay for their bus travel is around £800 a year. So if I was to suggest a tax of £800 a year on parents, there would be uproar, but that's what we have. Next one, £8 per week. Next one, I live at First Tower, my 2 kids at Rockyer. That's 4 bus trips every day. Another, yes, it would be a huge help. My son takes 1 bus to school and has to get 2 buses home. And we go back to these mopeds. Somebody really nicely messaged me. I got my moped because it worked out cheaper to pay a £5 or so every week for petrol and paying my insurance each year than it is to pay for buses to go from college every day. Gross, honestly. Marvelous language there. So number 11, I'm a single parent student. That's a cost of £17 a week in a standard school bus fares. When you're on a low income here, everything seems so expensive. Putting children first, when exactly? I'm going to keep going because I think the voices of people need to be heard in this assembly. The reality of this costing will be a huge support for us as parents and for children. £2.40 a day, taking the bus to school, £12 a week. It is time to Jersey to put the children first in action, not only in flyers. I've got 2 teenagers and spend £16 a week on bus that gets them there and back every day. My teenage daughter catches 2 buses in a week to get to and from school. We are a working family on low income. This will take a big stress of us as a family per week. So an extra of in there. Next one, that's £17 per week for 2 children. We figure out it costs us £612 a year to get our children to school and back. We are a low income family who aren't eligible for income support or any benefits. And we also have an elderly family member who lives with us. So we have a lot of care costs as well. And so this is who it is targeting. Not just those on low incomes who are really struggling, but those who are just above, barely getting by, week to week, month to month. And these costs are real for them. And as an assembly, we can do something about it. Next one, good evening. You have asked me about bus fares, very polite. I spend £1.70 a day per child. I have twins, so my family it's £3.40 a day, times 5, £17 a week. Your proposal would save me a fortune. Spend £6 a week just to pick up my little one from school and club, and on the way back we walk so I can save money. So there we go. On the school term, it's double. Those are the reality of these costs. I mean, one more, sir, and I'll cut some of them out because I know people want to get through these debates quickly. I have 3 children. We can have up to 30 trips if all 3 quarter bus a week, 2 days, times 5 days, 30 trips. Do the math, £24 of 39 school weeks, approximately £936 a year. I haven't checked the maths on that one, so I apologise. Yes, your proposal would definitely help families. These are just some examples from whom I have permission to share. And by the way, that level of engagement was high. The cost is a reality. It affects available income. It takes money from families for whom the choice is to pay, walk, or struggle to attend school. Our school bus service should be that. A service to enable children to go to school, not another financial burden for parents and families. And it is. This is an opportunity to help so many families from across our communities, and it will be disproportionately positive for those who are on low incomes and middle incomes. £620 a year is common and significant. £936 a year is a reality. We have a duty as leaders and representatives to understand and address the real financial challenges faced by families on this island. We can do something about this today. It is our gift to change these charges. By voting for this amendment, you will have direct and positive impact on many, many families, putting much needed money back into their pockets. Or you will give the message to parents that even though the cost has been spelt out to you, you will vote to continue this charge on the families of Jersey. Sir, I urge members to take the final opportunity in this term of the Assembly to make a significant change that will help families and push towards a change in our travel habits. Sir, I would ask for the appeal on this amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I ask the referee to place a voting link into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the referee to close the voting. The amendment has been adopted. 23 votes pour, 17 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 3 votes contre, making a total of 23 pour, 20 contre.
Sir, may I just thank members for such a marvellous step. Thank you very much, sir.
Very well. Both sides of the vote are called for.
Those voting contre in the chat, Senator Lafondre, Deputy Pinnell, and Senator Ferguson. And then in the link, the Connétable of Brouville, the Connétable of St Clement, Deputy Guida, Deputy of St Peter, Senator Farnham, the Connétable of St Brelard, Deputy Masson, Deputy of St Mary, Senator Gorst, Deputy Ayer, the Deputy of St Juan, Deputy Trinity, Deputy Ash, Deputy Martin, the Connétable of St Juan, Deputy Morale and Deputy Lewis. Those voting for in the link, deputies are Deputy Labby, the Connétable of St John, Senator Valois, Deputy Lahegara, Deputy Ward, Senator Pallett, Deputy Wickenden, the Connétable of St Martin, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Tadier, Senator Moore, the Connétable of St Mary, Deputy Southern, Deputy Alves, Deputy of Brouville, Deputy Gardner, the Connétable of St Lawrence, the Deputy of St John, Deputy Young, Senator Mezek, Deputy Pamplin, the Deputy of St Martin, and Deputy Truscott.
Very well. The next amendment listed in the running order is Amendment 11, lodged by Deputy Ward, and I ask the greffier to read that amendment.
Page 3, paragraph F. After the words Appendix 2, Summary Tables 5.1 and 2 to the report, insert the words, with provision to be made from the COVID-19 reserve within the General Reserve to the Children, Young People, Education and Skills Department to ensure that all schools have a guaranteed minimum 15% headroom funding remaining after staffing and accommodation costs have been taken into account.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. just like when is that, I'm not sure if, sorry, just give me 1 second to get my IT working. Apologies, sir. There we go. Just so like when Leyton Orient have a good win, there's no time to celebrate because we're on to the next game, I suppose. But even they can go on a winning streak sometimes. So let's hope we all can. So much for the underdog. So this amendment is to address the identified issues around the provision of day-to-day resources in schools. That is such an important one. It's about day-to-day resources, both anecdotally and via evidence to scrutiny from school governors who raised a shortfall of £23 million. There is an obvious problem with school funding. Doubts over this figure cannot be confirmed as we have not seen the outcome of the school funding review and the subsequent school funding formula, but that's for another issue. Therefore, given the importance of education for our children to our lives and the future of this island, it is pertinent to identify and formalise resources in schools for the daily needs of the process of education. The provision of books, materials for the classroom, for practical subjects from science to cookery and across the key stages. It should not be left to chance, charity or the goodwill of staff. Staff should not be spending their own money on resourcing their classrooms. We assign funding for schools under a 30-year-old formula. It is outdated and has allowed consistent pressure on the resources needed in the classroom. For many years, these resources have been the first to suffer when budgets run out. Therefore, the need to protect and ensure that there is a standard available for schools has never been more necessary. So, from experience that I have had and from many others, when money is short, you have a choice. You can't buy a class set of books, you buy one between two, or you buy what you can, or you don't do that work because you haven't got the resources available. Or as so many primary school teachers do, they go out and buy the resources so that their class to give you that a little bit extra. And so that has to stop. So some members may consider this to be too prescriptive, but sir, it is not. It is protective and will be a percentage of the overall funding. So therefore, there will be a limit. We've heard from the Treasury Minister that headline indicators are positive for the economy. Now is the time to address our long-term education funding model. So I'm not going to say much more. I'm slightly disappointed this wasn't accepted by the Education Minister and COM, because this is trying to deal with an issue for schools to say, look, we're going to make sure that there is a level of funding for your resources that you can rely on. It makes it more economic because you can plan ahead. Each year you're waiting to see how much you can get. And you can't do deals with companies and say, look, if we were to buy for 3 years, can you give us a discount? You can't do those things. And so from my experience, glassware, chemicals are expensive, art materials are expensive, equipment in kitchens is expensive. And so what happens is it gets eroded away, and so standards drop. I'm not going to say anymore because I'm genuinely interested in members' views on this. Why they may support or why they may oppose it. Again, I hope the debate can be as positive and constructive. I refer members to the accompanying report that includes the answers to a very pertinent question by Deputy Higgins, a written question with regards to school deficits, which shows the history of deficits. So do we continue to have schools reliant upon cake sales to fund equipment, or take intelligent and definitive decisions to write into the funding an amount that allows not just for adequate funding, but a level that allows children the best opportunity? A school classed as adequate in a review will take drastic action to improve. Adequate funding is not enough. So I propose the amendment and I open the debate. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir, and congratulate Deputy Ward on his win of the day. Sir, I will be voting against this amendment and would urge other members to do the same. This amendment has no evidence to support the amount requested. The amount proposed is variable and may even prove to be unlimited in the wording of the proposition. And sir, it doesn't identify a funding source like we're going to see many times in this one for where the money will come from. If the deputy wants to spend 8.5 million here, could he tell the Assembly where he doesn't want to spend 8.5 million? What does he want to stop? So I do not accept the concept of a fixed percentage of headroom in budgeting for schools or colleges, and I'm actively reviewing the adequacy and distribution of the relevant budgets under the Education Reform Programme. The Jersey delivery model is different from that of most comparable models. The funding in schools in England, proportionately fewer costs are borne by schools, delegated budgets and more by central function, my department rather. So we spend more money by delegated functions in Jersey Property Holdings and IT. So the proposal for a 15% as a portion of total budget is not a recognised principle in the English schools funding formula and would not reflect the different balance of central and delegated responsibilities in the Jersey systems. Again, for example, the IT infrastructure, which is supported and provided by Modernising Digital in their budgets, or a significant proportion of spending on building maintenance, which is provided by the infrastructure department. So there's no parity. In a UK school, they would have money and they have to support their own IT, they have to support their own funding, which is where the headroom comes into. So schools are allocated a total budget based on the number of pupils in classes, weighted by age and supplemented by additional budgets for deprivation, the Jersey pupil premium, and assessed needs of those requiring specific support. Head teachers have delegated accountability to allocate their base budgets between their staff commitments and other non-paid demands. In general, prioritising spending on staff and further limiting non-staff spending. So the Independent School Funding Review recognised that the formula required modernising to reflect the changes in this practice. It recommended additional resources be allocated to address historical funding pressures, including non-pay pressures, and targeted growth for specific functions which were clearly funded below benchmark levels. It also recommended that further work be undertaken in a number of policy areas. See, I've turned my volume down again, sir. Noting that this may result in identifying additional resources requirements in the future years. So we are acting on those recommendations and investing over £11 million per year. So the school funding review and the funds it has delivered are significant. They are evidenced and they will deliver better outcomes for children and young people and better training for our staffs. So the £11 million per year for schools in the government plan will address the past overspending in our schools and as set out in Appendix 1 of the Deputy's own amendment and increase the funding by many million more. We are already putting significantly more money into the education of and into schools within this government plan of 11 million, sir, based on evidence in the school funding review. So the Assembly has already approved growth funding for these issues in the previous government plan 2021. The 5.5 million deficit funding equated to the overspend in schools and schools' direct support budgets in 2020. The department has set in train the Education Reform Programme to deliver the recommendations of the Independent School Funding Review and its wider service redesign objectives. The work is underway with the redesign of schools funding formula project commencing in April, with the aim of improving the transparency and the fairness of the distribution to direct school funding and identifying the potential costs of future policy changes. So I would like to remind members appendices 3 and 4 of the draft government plan, where they previously agreed growth under Putting Children First of approximately £35 million per annum. And in the appendices, it's demonstrated in greater detail. This investment also includes an additional amount of approximately £10 million per annum of growth for investment into higher education and improving overall educational outcomes. Appendix 3 identifies new growth proposed for 2022 onwards of approximately 1 million extra each year, and a further sum to be held in central reserves for additional demographic pressures if required. Sir, I do not believe further growth of the deputy's estimated 8.5 million per year is required at this time, particularly with no evidence to support the principle of 15% headroom, nor any evidence to confirm that 8.5 million would be the correct figure to achieve that. Sir, the financial implications of this amendment creates an unlimited provision with the general reserves estimated at 8.5 million in 2022, reducing the government's ability to react to unforeseen events, including the impact of COVID. In total, it increases expenditure by 25.5 million over the period of the plan. If accepted, this amendment will result in lower surpluses in 2023 and to 2025 years of the plan, preventing them from being able to reduce borrowing on COVID. So the deputy again raises this figure of £23 million that was just said to him by two members of a board of governors. At no point has any evidence been requested or given to substantiate that £23 million. The first time I heard about the £23 million was when it was said in a scrutiny panel. Scrutiny is supposed to work on evidence and proof. There is no proof on this, and I wish the figure would stop being bandied around. The work is being done on the school funding formula that's based on evidence, not on opinion, sir. Sir, I ask members to accept that we are already putting significant amounts of money into areas of education and putting children first, as set out in the government plan. And this proposition sets out an unlimited amount that is not costed, it's not detailed, and it's not defined. And is it needed? It'd be nice to have. Again, sir, where's the money coming from? Where's the 8.5 million not going to be spent so that we can put it? And if it's, are we going to end up with surpluses at the end of 2022 because of it? So I ask members to reject this, accepting that there is already significant funds going in to address overspends within the department and give adequate funding with evidence through the school funding review that was done to the education department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson. Senator Ferguson.
Oh, thank you, sir. Sorry, I had a slight glitch. Members will recall that we had a high net worth resident who had undertaken to supply schools, starting with the primary schools, with computers and training programs, but the education department preferred to spend several £1 million rather than accept an more than up-to-date system free. It has since used Deloitte's, but why not from the high net worth individual? You know, what are children being taught? Just Microsoft? Similarly, the education department is preferring to set up a do-it-yourself scheme rather than use a first-class scheme, Hope House. In view of this reluctance to admit that some of the functions will be better undertaken by external sources, is it not time to apply zero-based budgeting to a department which appears to be incapable of sensible budgeting? Let us see a properly organised department before we start, you know, spending a lot of extra money. You know, I would like to see a zero-based budget before we get on to adding this and deducting that, because I haven't seen much sensible actions or many sensible actions coming out of the education department at the moment. Thank you, sir.
Very much. And does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And in proposing this amendment, Deputy Ward is speaking from experience. He knows what it's like to work in a school as a teacher, as a head of department, and have to manage the resources you have to ensure that you can provide the best education possible for the students who you're teaching. And he has recently, and in the appendix to this amendment, made reference to the figures, which are very clear and which several members of the Board of Governors from one secondary school have spoken out on so clearly recently, which is the basic fact that our schools are under-resourced. And in recognising that fact through his own experience, Deputy Ward did, right at the very start of this term of office, bring an amendment to the Common Strategic Policy to try to set the groundwork for dealing with this, to ensure that our schools can be resourced properly. And it has been acknowledged and agreed by those in government in recent years that our funding for education is not adequate and has needed to be looked at and dealt with. But as with so much that this government has done over the last few years, is as of yet it has failed to produce the answers to that, or at least answers which we can have confidence in will actually resolve this issue. Just yesterday we were debating the health insurance fund and the implications there are for long-term funding of healthcare in the island, something that we were meant to be in a clearer position on by this time of year, and we're not. And now we're debating funding for our schools, something which we acknowledge is inadequate right now with the current formula, and which we're just not clear enough at this point in what is actually going to be proposed to resolve this in the future. I happen to be friends with some people who are teachers in our Jersey schools, and I'm thinking of one close friend in particular who every time I speak to speaks with such passion about the line of work that she's in, how much she adores the children that she teaches, how much she wants to give to them in her working life to ensure that they have the best options, the best opportunities in life, and who I happen to know spends quite a lot of her own money supplementing the budget she has to spend in resources in her classroom to pay for. Sometimes it's just the little things like papers and resources, so children, because she teaches younger children in particular, can be creative and make things that they wouldn't have had to use, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to use otherwise. And I just think it's so sad that there can be people who are so passionate about young people and education in our society and who go into that line of work with all the best of intentions and end up not just having to put into it their labour, but also their income putting back into it. And that should never be the case. Our education system should be funded up front properly enough so that teachers have those options to be able to teach those children in the ways that they think is best. And the more pressure that those teachers face, especially when you bear in mind the appalling way that they've been treated in recent years on pay, on conditions, on the difficulties that they've had with the COVID response as well. And I'll throw into that as well the complete lack of action on the housing crisis as well, which affects many of our key workers in particular. We're just going to end up losing some of these people because after time, they will feel like there is only so much they can give before they are risking really impacting on their own lives, and will just feel that they're either better off doing something else for a living or they're better off going somewhere else to continue teaching. And we really can't allow ourselves to get into that situation. the very worst example of this I saw recently on social media, a video from the United States of a competition, and it's one of those things you see and you think it must be a joke. It's the sort of thing that you'd expect in Squid Game or something like that, of a group of teachers fighting over a pile of $1 bills that was offered in some competition, and all the money they got to keep, they would be able to spend on their classrooms. And it's a shocking sight to see that in another country, but it is the case that there are people in our own jurisdiction who are spending their own money to supplement their classroom budgets. And in setting this figure, which Deputy Ward thinks is adequate from his own experience in teaching, we can have at least some degree of confidence that in the near future, it won't be the case that funding for classroom budgets will be under such pressure as it currently is. So I would urge members to support Deputy Ward. There will be opportunities in future to look at this again and the wider implications on education funding. But right now, we are getting from this government the same thing that we're getting from our concerns on other funding pressures, which is a lack of clarity about what exactly is the way forward. And I don't think that's a healthy situation to be in right now, especially when this is the last government plan of this term of office, and we'd be doing a thoroughly positive thing in supporting an amendment which seeks to get the funding that those schools need and ease off the pressure, and hopefully do something to alleviate the concerns of those who are working in the front line of our education system, and to those governors of some of our schools as well, who have very bravely spoken out in recent weeks and months. I think we should give them our support, and the way we do that is to vote in support of Deputy Ward's amendment. So I would urge members to do that.
Very much, Sam. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Chief Minister.
Sorry, it is that delay, I think, between us setting
It's all right.
consent.
I was going to pause, but it's appeared now. So yes, Chief Minister.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I think I'm going to try and keep it very, very short. So in fact, I'll keep my camera off just to avoid issues in terms of transmission, communication rather. Although, sir, it is not the same amendment, it might be helpful for members to look at the comments, obviously the comments that we made on Amendment 11, which is hopefully the one we're debating, but also the comments we made on in Amendment 18. And the reason I reference 18, sir, is on page 5 of those comments, there is a table which demonstrates the change in investment into education that has taken place in the last few years. Now, sir, I'm absolutely taking this at face value. This is the data that we asked to be compiled. But in 2016, the growth in allocation in education was about £3.5 million, sir. In 2018, it was 5.8 million. Then, sir, I want to read the totals that basically since 2019 was the end of the MTFP, and that was 6.7 million, sir. And then I want to read the totals that this council ministers has had influence over. In 2020, it went up to 9 million. Don't forget, this is growth. In 2021, it was, sorry, this is cumulative growth. It is 18 million. In 2022, it is 24 million, 25 million, 26 million, 27 million, sir. If one actually looks in Appendix 3 and 4, sir, of the government plan, the SIPES budget as a whole, and I may even, actually, I don't think I can lay my hand on it at the moment, so I was going to give the page reference, but I might put that in the chat. Is approximately £35 million a year. In fact, I think in my opening statement, sir, I said that adds up in total to around £150 million extra growth going into the SIPES budget, of which a significant proportion is going into education as a result of actions that we have already taken. Some of that money has already gone into schools' budgets this year, sir, on the basis of the figures that we have in front of us. So, sir, this is why the picture that Senator Mezek painted of teachers in other jurisdictions, in his word, I think, grasping around for money on an ice skating rink, which I'd understood was meant to be a bit of fun, but in certain areas was deemed not to be appropriate, and I'm not commenting one way or another on that. That is another jurisdiction, sir. We have to try and base our decisions based on the evidence, not necessarily on opinions of others, but on the evidence that we have in front of us. And as I said, sir, particularly if one looks on the comments that I've referred to, sir, but also most particularly on looking at, and as I'll put the page reference in the chat, sir, in the government plan, its appendixes 4 is the growth that has already been embedded in. Appendix 3 is the growth that we are being asked to approve essentially this year. There are millions upon millions of pounds of growth going into the education budget, and that is why, sir, the education minister is basically saying, actually, we don't need this cash. It is not, it is not funded, sir. Deputy Ward has not been clear where this comes from. There is a risk, actually, in comments he's made between this and other amendments, that essentially he's seeking us to borrow to fund recurring revenue expenditure, which fundamentally is not the right approach on this. But also fundamentally, as I've said, we have put millions upon millions of pounds into the education budgets in the last couple of years and going forward. And it is a great shame that that is not recognised, and that we seem to be being, the way the message is being mixed in is by referring it to other jurisdictions who have obviously not put that level of investment in. So now, can in the future more be done? Well, let's let the department bed down, utilise the money we have given. It is significant change that's going in there, sir, and then assess afterwards. But sir, there is a lot of money that has gone into education, and that is why, sir, we are not supporting this or some of the other amendments that Deputy Ward is bringing in. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Chief Minister. Senator Valwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. I just briefly wanted to comment following the Children and Education Minister's speech on this amendment. I just wanted to clear up that this isn't a scrutiny amendment. This is an amendment from Deputy Ward. And also, it concerns me when the minister refers to having evidence, and no matter how many times, whether it's the panel or whether it's individual members that have asked for that evidence from the department, particularly around the school funding formula, because it is 30 years old, and that was the point in doing the independent school funding review, there's been a refusal to share that. And therefore, how can any evidence be provided to prove that any further funding is required? And I just wanted to make those points, and also make the point about the 35 million per annum of extra investment. So overall, that's not just education. The independent school funding review identified 11.6 million extra needed, and that was without doing any inclusion review, which was identified that probably needed a large sum more in order to support those vulnerable and need of children in our education system. The world is very different to what it was 30 years ago. The needs of children and young people in our education system are very different to what they were 30 years ago. And the education system has fundamentally changed since 30 years ago. And so I just wanted to make those points, because the 11.6 million hasn't been fully funded as of yet, and that will come in over the time of the plan. And it bothers me when I hear, when we talk about investment over a period of time, that isn't necessarily per annum, and per annum is what is to get by per year. 5.5 million with the 7.9 that was agreed for 2021 actually just covered what was already being spent. we were bringing ourselves back onto a level playing field because that money was already being spent. A bit like the proposition in the government plan by the Home Affairs Minister, which is stating, well, we need more money for Sea Cadets because actually that money's already being spent. We're just providing that level playing field. It's not recognising any of the further needs, like the inclusion review, like the lower prior attainment, like the English as an additional language, as an example. So, sir, I wish that when we're talking about this, we talk about the actual facts, and I would like further facts and I would like that evidence. So if the Minister would be willing to share that, I'd be more than grateful. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Senator. Conor Harbison-Saviour.
Yes, sir. It's just a quick one. It's just to say that I'm I'm one of the governors of Grainville School, and I can tell you that the money is well needed and I will be supporting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Conor Tarb, does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Senator Valois touched on this, and this is something that we've seen in previous assemblies, and indeed when I was chair of the relevant panel last term, we brought a similar amendment, although a smaller amount of money, because what was being touted as investment and an increase in money going into education wasn't actually an increase. It was indeed just covering demographics and providing the same service. And I think members need to be aware of that, and that there perhaps isn't as much investment going into education as we're being led to believe. And I think the previous speaker made one brief and very clear point that it's needed, and she obviously speaks from experience of being a member of a board of governors. And I think we need to think about, yes, board of governors, and also we need to think about what teachers are telling us. And Deputy Ward, as a former teacher himself, he's obviously, as I am myself and others who have been teachers, are in touch with those who are still in the profession. And teachers are telling us loud and clear, sir, that this money is desperately needed. And I think it was the Chief Minister that said a lot of money has gone into education. Yes, we're hearing that from government, but then we're hearing from teachers it's not enough. Who are we going to listen to? I choose to listen to the professionals who are there with the children every day. They know the realities of what it is actually like working with children and what is needed. And I think we choose to ignore them at our peril because they have children's best interests at heart. I will wholeheartedly be supporting this amendment today, and I would urge other members to do so if we are serious about putting children first, and about the basics of giving them what they need in our education system, as Deputy Ward has referred to, in terms of textbooks and basic resources like that. So I urge members to support, and I will be supporting this myself, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Pinnell.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted very briefly to reiterate some of the financial implications of this amendment, which proposes a significant and unlimited allocation of funding from the COVID reserve, estimated at £8.5 million. Over the period of this government plan, this increases expenditure estimated to be about £25.5 million, but could be considerably more. Just to add, this would prolong the government's ability to pay back the COVID-19 borrowing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. I feel, having lodged last week the population policy, which majors very heavily on education, skills and lifelong learning, that it would be remiss of me not to make a comment. During the course of that, I worked very closely with Deputy Wickenden as part of this, as it is a council minister's proposition, so I worked with all the ministers. And what I've understood is the independent schools funding recommendations of 42 million quid over the next 4 years has been accepted by the governors of the schools. In addition to the additional spending that the Chief Minister has talked about, 35 million a year into SIPES in general, has been accepted and is a level that is proved to be fair and reasonable. Now, as I also understand it, the schools have not come back and asked for any more. If they were asking for more, then we would have to listen. But that is my understanding, and I will support Deputy Wickenden on that. So I'm passionate about education. Lifelong learning is essential for the future of this particular island over the next 20, 30, 40 years, the long term. We have to get it right. But as I understand it at the moment, the education minister has got the right thing. There's enough money going into it. It's not been asked for by the schools, and therefore this is not necessary. If it was necessary and the schools were asking for it, and that's my point, if they were asking for it, then we'd be having a different conversation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the previous speaker, as they say. Firstly, I agree with him that children are our future. That's why this government has putting children first in their common strategic priorities, one would imagine, because the children of the island now are the islanders of the future, and therefore what we invest in them now helps to set the future of the island. And of course, I'm sure every member would like the island to have the strongest possible future, and therefore investing in the education of our children will assist in providing that strong future path for the island, which we all want. But sir, if perhaps the deputy had paid closer attention to the scrutiny panel hearings conducted by the Education and Home Affairs, Children, Education and Home Affairs panel recently, he would see that in fact school governors are speaking out and calling for greater investment in education. The spend against GDP on education is too low, and greater investment is needed. So it is difficult as somebody who wishes to be fiscally responsible and will later criticise this government for increasing its expenditure that it's asking the Assembly to support in this government plan so drastically as it has done and it is doing. But our role here as political representatives of the people who have put us here is to talk about priorities, our priorities for today and our priorities for the future, because every single penny that we spend on the public sector is valuable and important. But my sense, sir, is that this alliance government have got their priorities extremely wrong. They are placing far too much emphasis on capital expenditure and far too little emphasis on the delivery of services and the improvement of services that are so desperately needed. It is very clear that education is in need of greater funding, and so for that reason, I will most certainly be supporting this amendment.
Very much, Senator. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? No other member wishes to speak. Then
Sorry, sir, I couldn't make my machine work.
Yeah. Conrad Harbison-Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And I just briefly want to mention the fact that I was surprised some time ago to be asked by one of the schools if the parish would be prepared to supply a rubbish bin. And this seemed rather curious, and I explored further and defined that actually this is exactly the point that I think Deputy Ward is making. There isn't the headroom for this sort of minor, what might be considered minor expenditure, and to the extent that also, of course, that led on to a question about what are the schools doing about recycling, and they obviously are very keen to do so. And I did have an exchange with the Education Minister, and it was pointed out, oh, it's up to the schools to do that. So it seems to me that we might be getting shall we say, into the weeds of the whole matter. But the fact is, if they haven't got the money to do the minor things such as this, there must be a shortfall. So there is something wrong in the system. And I have to say that in order to support the schools, if only on recycling, which is going to cost a lot, downside less than well, considerably less than is being proposed in monetary terms, as a principle, I feel I should be supporting the Deputy's proposition. Thank you
very much, Conor. Does any other member wish to speak on the amendment? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir. We're absolutely rocking through these today, aren't we? But there we go. I'd just like to thank everybody who spoke today on this one. Just get my notes together. It took me a little bit unawares. I thought there'd be a lot more people speaking there. So there we go. So I bring this I bring this proposition, this amendment, in large part, I have to say, through experience, from my experience in schools and through the experience of so many friends and colleagues I know in schools, and from the experience of parents and children who have experienced the issues that I pointed out. And so I think it's really important that we address this issue now and not leave it another term, another 4 years, another tranche of government as we go on. So I just need to sort my notes out because I've lost a piece of paper. Excuse me, sir. If I want to be polite enough to address everybody who's spoken, I need my notes. So Deputy Wickenden, the Minister for Children and Education. I was disappointed that he didn't take this opportunity to accept this amendment for one simple reason. It is there to support education. And I think there's a lack of understanding there. This is a percentage put aside so that the day-to-day resourcing of schools can be enabled, so that schools do not have to make the difficult decisions between departments. And these are real, sir. I've experienced them. I'm sorry, Mr. Whoever or Miss Whoever. We cannot buy you a set of books for your department this year. We might be able to next year because we've prioritised this other department because we've had to, because their books are way older than yours. And so we need to get them. And there's a new curriculum coming forward. And so this is the experience I've seen. The curricula change frequently. And when they do, the content changes, textbooks change, and schools simply cannot afford those basics. That's where we are. That's the reality of where we are. And so, sir, the very first thing I did in this assembly in a common strategic policy, there were two things. One was to have a youth facility agreed in the centre of St Helier, almost unanimously. And I'm so pleased that happened. I'm just sad it hasn't happened yet, but we're still working on it. The other one was to bring headroom funding 15%. And at that time, it was said, well, we don't need to do this because there's a school funding review and we'll look at that. And I was disappointed, but, you know, I thought to myself, well, at least I've got the question out there and it's going to come back from the school funding review. And I'm absolutely certain that I'll identify the issues in funding in schools. So that's OK. But, sir, the school funding review, we still haven't seen the outcome. We haven't seen the formula. And we are, what is it? The 16th of December 2021. The new funding formula is meant to be in place on the 1st of January. That's what we've been told. However, sir, this is, as Senator Valois so rightly said, not a scrutiny amendment. It is my amendment brought to this assembly in the same way as the original one was. So when the Minister for Children and Education spoke, he talked about the amount of money that was going into parts of schools that I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about buildings. I'm not talking about staffing for special needs. I'm not talking about staffing for anything. This is headroom funding. And I'm concerned that he doesn't understand what that means. It's the additionals, the day-to-day. And the experience of being in the classroom needs to be listened to. And I would question whether the minister and the chief minister actually understand what that is. Do they know the price of textbooks? Do they know the price of glassware, of chemicals, of art equipment, of art paper, of paints, of equipment needed for cookery or any practical subject? The consumables such as wood in woodwork or whatever it's called nowadays, or in materials classes, the acrylics that we're using, these modern materials, the stuff that's needed for 3D printing if we were to manage to do that in schools. Do they understand the cost that comes from PE equipment, from books for English? So if you want a child to read a book, give them a book, not share a book between two. Is that where we are on a wealthy island? Do they understand those costs? And the fact that if you've got 1,000 people in a secondary school, young people, things get broken, things get lost. They are consumables and they need to be replaced year on year on year. I wonder whether they have the same debates in Broad Street and in government as to whether they're going to have enough paper for the printer or whether the budget's run out. And so I have had testimony again, and I'm not going to read them all out because I know people want to get on with this debate. And I apologise. Well, I'm going to summarise them. Of staff who have written to me saying they do spend their own money, particularly in primary schools, on providing those little bits of extra, but also on those basics. We run out of pens, so I bought some pens. It's not a problem. I'm owed a certain amount of money by the school, but I won't get it back because I know that budgets ended in October for materials. I know members of staff who, and myself, sir, I don't know if I should confess this or not, but every time I used to go on a course, and I know staff do this all the time, you would pick up every single pen, every single pencil, every single post note, every single pad, and you'd take them back and use them as resources. And you would do that because you knew there wasn't the money to spend on resources. I mentioned it. I look back to the Hansard to the original speech, and it's some time ago, so I think I'm allowed to repeat it. And there was a budget. I think it was £8.80 per student that I had per year to provide the materials to teach science. A textbook then, sir, was £15.99. And to Senator Ferguson, who talked about the day-to-day. The funding, the spending in schools, I would say to her, Senator, schools work miracles. They work miracles on the ridiculously low budgets they've got for resources every year. If I wanted anyone running my island's finances, it would be somebody who works in the finance office of a school who can literally make a silk purse out of a sow's ear when it comes to using budgets, because that's the reality of what's happening in our schools. And I bring these realities to the Assembly, not just because of experience, because it is my duty as an elected official to bring the reality of these things to this Assembly so that we can make change. So the appendices referred to by Deputy Wickenden, the Children and Education Minister and the Chief Minister, do not talk about what I am talking about. This is about headroom funding. It's about the resourcing needed for day-to-day consumables. It's not about all of those things that are put in that appendix, which I'm actually not going to go through. People can see it. None of those are about paper, books, resources, materials, and dare I say the extras. In our schools, if there are 2 or 3 textbooks available, all given slightly different nuances, one might be better for one student, one might be better for another, you don't buy 2, you buy 1, hopefully you get a deal, and you often go for the cheapest. That's not high quality education. That's not high quality resourcing. You wouldn't see that in business. You wouldn't see that in a company that wants to do the best for its staff. You wouldn't see that in a world-class leading education system. And that's what we need and want on this island. And if we are not willing to fund that small part of it, let's not play games. Let's admit it and say to our children, You're not going to be put first. You're going to be put where you fit, and we'll just do our best. And, you know, if you haven't got the resources, tough. So I'm not willing to do that. And I think it's the wrong use of money. There was an irony to something that Senator LaFond just said, the Chief Minister said about borrowing for this, given that we're just about to enter into the largest amount of borrowing we ever have on this island, but not for schools, and we can't fund schools. We can put £20 million aside for a technology fund that won't even be used for half a year, but we can't find the money for headroom funding. Senator Vowell, absolutely correct. It is my amendment, and you're so right about evidence. This was a really difficult one. We have not seen the school funding formula. We have not seen the outcome of the school funding review. It's gone for, I just remembered the phrase, it's gone out of my head. The quality assurance is what it's gone for. I have no idea what quality assurance means. But that's where we are. But it should be in place on the 1st of January. So the Constables and Saviour, thank you. Simple, to the point, absolutely. And that's experience. That's experience of somebody who's not got just got huge experience of this assembly, but has got experience of being a school governor. Deputy Dublé just shows she understands. She understands. She worked in primary schools. Her career was there. She's probably gone out, I'm sure, and bought resources herself. I know that would be the case, and I think you would struggle to find a teacher who has not bought something for their classroom, because otherwise they simply won't have it, because there's not a resource there to go and get it. Deputy Pinnell, this is a percentage of the overall budget, therefore it is not unlimited. That's the way percentages work. Deputy Hewlin, schools are desperate for cash. They don't come and speak out for it. Yes, they do. So Hope Valley governors spoke out about it. They've spoke out about it, and their parents have spoke out about it. If you took the time to go and speak to teachers and schools and others, you would hear them speaking out about it. But what's happening at the moment at schools, they have been through a horrendous time with COVID and under-resourcing and the exhaustion of this term as they come up to Christmas. It's not for them to speak out. It's for us as leaders in this assembly to understand and make the change so they don't have to speak out. That's the key to this. That's what we need to be doing today. And that's the opportunity you've got today. And Senator Moore, you're correct. I just note that Reform have not used the phrase alliance government yet, but thank you, Senator Moore. I was worried that you were looking, I'd shared my screen because you said something about priorities. And in the things I've made for my closing speech, my closing speech, I wrote in large letters, the priorities of government are wrong. We are doing the classic, we are taking the classic path of huge, high PR capital projects. We are fixing the front garden while at the back of the house, the back door's falling off and the back of the house is not inhabitable. We are not funding the things that are essential and day-to-day have a direct impact. And this would say to our teachers and our schools, and most importantly, our children, you're valued, you're worth it. You're worth this investment. Yeah, you don't have to struggle and share a book. There's one each. And there's some extra ones, actually, if you leave your book at home. In fact, here, let's issue with a book so you've got it all the time. That rarely happens, particularly in our state schools, because the money just simply is not there. Constable Jackson, he's correct. He's got it. He's got this one. It's day-to-day funding, and it's really interesting that it's the constable that they go to say that we need a bin. And let's just look at that. In Jersey at the moment, in our schools, we are having schools go to a constable of a parish to say we need a bin. We don't have the money for a bin. I don't know why I'm laughing at that. It's a disgrace. It's genuinely, in the truest sense of the word, sir, it's pathetic. In the truest sense of the word, and we must address this issue. So there is a history of underfunding. Deputy Higgins' question shows this, and I want to take issue with one really important point from the Chief Minister when he talks about growth. He talks about growth in a way, and the analogy I have is that if I was overdrawn each month by £1,000 and my wages come in and I pay that back, it seems to me that the Chief Minister would say that over the course of a year, I've had £12,000 of growth because I'm putting £12,000 towards the debt that I've had. There's not extra money, it's paying off the debt that I've spent. And schools were overspending purposefully because they had no choice. But they weren't overspending to a point where they were improving their resources. They were just standing still, and they are. So we have a choice. Do we invest in the future of our children? Do we invest in in this population that we want to come through and be skilled and able to do the work and do the jobs and have the skills to look after us in our old age? Or do we continue with the failed model of funding, and we haven't seen the new one, and fund appropriately? What this does, it provides security for schools to say, we will have that amount of money in our budget that is appropriate for us to fund the day-to-day resourcing. Sir, I ask members of this assembly to make the correct choice this time, because the school funding review promised last time has not happened. The school funding formula coming from that we have not seen, and I am very concerned that and I've forgotten the term again that I said earlier, the quality assurance is simply going to, given the attitude of the Chief Minister and the attitude of the Education Minister over this, is that we don't need the money, don't worry about it. And that quality assurance is going to continue the underfunding. The other side of the coin is this, sir. By putting this forward today, if we get to a stage through next year where schools have way too much and they simply don't need it, then let's change it. I would love to bring an amendment to this assembly that says, oh, we've overfunded schools and we can take some back. Wouldn't that be a miracle? And I tell you what, schools would be very happy if that happened. Our children would be happier, our parents would be happier, and our future would be brighter. So I urge members, we're on a roll. We're doing the right things today. Let's support this amendment. Let's protect our school funding, and let's move them forward. Thank you, sir. I ask for the appel.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I ask the greffier to place a vote into the link, and I open the voting and ask members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. In the link, there are 19 votes pour, 16 votes contre, and no abstentions. In the chat, there are a further 2 votes pour, making the total pour 21, and there are 6 votes contre, making the total votes contre 22. Therefore, the amendment is defeated. Very well. Is the adjournment called for?
Yes, sir.
The Assembly stands adjourned until 2:50.